Good morning, everyone who's here, who's on the line, and who's on the internet. We apologize again for having to do these things virtually, and I can assure you that every one of us up here feels that, you have to do it, but it's awful hard to just run meetings and give people a fair chance to talk. But we're going to do our level best to make sure that happens. Could we please have a call? We're going to call a meeting of the Consolidated Municipality of the Board of Supervisors to order, and the Redevelopment Authority and the Board of Health. Got all three today. Can we have a roll call, please?
Supervisor Giomi?
I'm here.
Supervisor Vonkowski? Supervisor Bagwell?
Here.
Supervisor Barrett?
Here.
Mayor Kroll?
Here. Could we call our good friend Michael Herbert from the First Christian Church to get us started today? Michael, thank you very much.
Father, we thank you that we can be here to meet, and we just know and invite you in, the God of wisdom, the God of truth, the God of knowledge. And we just pray that these meetings are led by that knowledge, wisdom, and truth. We pray for everyone here and the decisions they have to make, Lord, that you be with them, and that you just bring healing to our land, Father. We thank you so much, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. All right. Who wants to do the pledge? Supervisor Bagwell will do the pledge this morning.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lori.
Pleasure.
All right, let's go on to item. I get this off. Easier to talk. Let's take up item number 5, public comment. This is a time for folks to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of this public body. We have public comment that was submitted to us in writing. I want to tell everybody that if you did that, you can rest assured that we've read all that. If there's additional public comment you want to put on the record, feel free to do that as well. Anybody, Desi, where are we on public comment?
I see no public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me?
There is no public comment.
Okay.
Mayor, can I just go over the two that were submitted?
I couldn't hear that.
The two that were submitted by email, the public comment?
Yeah. So you want to read them?
No, I'm just going to read a few sentences.
Okay, go.
So I just wanted to note for the record that we received advanced public comment for this meeting. Maurice White submitted written comment regarding agenda item 21A, which relates to the downtown parking analysis. And Angelina Bolentini-Wolf submitted written comment generally relating to use permits for outdoor restaurant dining. And these comments have been posted on the city's website as part of the supporting materials for today's meeting and will also be referenced in the minutes of the meeting today.
Any other public comment? Okay, I don't hear and I don't see anybody, so we'll move on here. Let's take up item 6, approval of the minutes of June 18th and June 19th, 2020. Everybody had a chance to look at that? Motion's in order if we want to do it.
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Board of Supervisors for June 18th, 2020 and June 19th, 2020 as presented.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you very much. Let's take up the adoption of the agenda. We're going to pull from the agenda item 30D that deals with the health department. Are there any other items, City Manager, that we should pull?
No other items?
None? Okay. Board members, we okay with the agenda with the exception of 30D, which we'll pull? Don't hear any objections. So with that objection, we'll adopt the agenda as published with the exception of item 30 Delta, which deals with the health board. We'll talk about that again this afternoon. Okay, let's go on to the consent agenda. I've had a request to pull items 10, A and B. I'm having trouble reading my own writing these days, folks. 10A and B. Anybody want anything else pulled from the consent agenda? Anybody online who may want to have something pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, I don't hear any. I don't see any. All right, then, we'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of items 10A and 10B, which will be pulled for individual discussion. We'll take up right after this motion. All right,
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 8 and 9, 9A and 9B.
there's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. That concludes the consent agenda. Let's take up item 10A. Who's doing this one? Mr. Hummel, come on up here. How are you doing? Good to see you here.
Sir, how are you?
I'm all right.
Good.
Yeah. Carol, you go get it. I'm tired this morning. You do it.
You're already tired?
I'm already, I got
You're
tired
just
before I got
getting
here.
started. You're not warmed up, that's what it is.
That's right, not warmed up.
This is for the discussion and possible action regarding contract 203-00049 for the Carson City Sewer Pipeline Condition Assessment Phase 3 with Keller Associates, Inc. for a total not to exceed amount of $200,000 to be funded from the Water Professional Services account approved in the FY21 budget.
Very good. Andy, you want to take us through what we're doing here?
Yeah,
Just the
exactly.
highlights, and then we got some questions. If you
Yeah.
we'll fill it out.
Yeah, for the record, Andy Hummel, wastewater utility manager. For this one, this is the third phase of our pipeline and condition assessment on the wastewater system. First two phases, phase one, we focus largely on the larger diameter pipelines in the city. Second phase, that area was largely older pipelines. So get a kind of a worst look at what the city infrastructure is doing for us. And then this phase is more of a mix, newer, older, different pipe types, things like that. So with this phase, we're going to be able to project other pipelines that are, similar material, age, that kind of stuff, generally how they should be doing.
Okay. We have some questions of Supervisor Bunkowski.
Andy, will Phase 3 finish this project, or will there be additional phases? Because it looks like this is also on the west side, so there's still a large portion of the town that will not have been scoped once this is done.
Yeah, there'll be still approximately 50% of the town left that we could go look at. We're hopeful that this phase give us enough statistical data that we can project that onto the other areas and then focus that on, those older ones that we think are in bad shape. Those ones we go look at next, or have our crews, or if there's enough of them, continue on with this work.
So if the intent is to do projections, so then you would look at the statistical data and say, okay, the clay pipe is generally in this condition, so we're going to apply that to any other clay pipe, and cast iron will be this, and so on?
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mayor, the reason that I pulled this item is just to add some clarifying language.
Sure.
In the first paragraph of the contract, it says this contract is made and entered into the 16th day of July 2020, which generally would be the effective date of the contract. But on page 5 of the contract, under item 3, contract term, it says the contract effective date is August 3rd, 2020. So because there could be an apparent conflict there, or it's not clear, I talked to Dan, and he gave me some alternate language to put into item number 3, contract term. So
That's a good catch. Go for it.
what I'd like to do is delete the current line under 3.1 and replace it with the term of this contract begins on August 3rd, 2020 and ends on June 30, 2021, unless sooner terminated by either party in accordance with Section 7 contract termination.
Got that? Okay. We'll take a, you ready to do a motion on that? Brad?
Yes.
We'll take a motion on 10 Alpha then.
I move to approve the contract as presented with the change read into the record on Section 3.1 to delete the current line and replace it with the term of this contract begins on August 3rd, 2020 and ends on June 30, 2021, unless sooner terminated by either party in accordance with Section 7 contract termination.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Thanks, Brad. That was a good catch. Okay, let's take up item 10 Bravo. Carol?
Good morning again.
Good morning
Carol
again.
Akers, Purchasing and Contracts. This is for the discussion and possible action regarding a joinder contract for employee medical services with ARC Health and Wellness. This is through the Washoe County contract number 3086-19. This is for an annual amount not to exceed $85,000. And this is, we are going to correct it and do this through June 30th of 2022.
June of 20? Yeah, if I can explain. Okay, all right. Who else is going to do it? Is this it?
We have Cecilia here to answer. Cecilia Myers, Risk Management.
Okay, let's pull it and see where we go. We'll, if we have Carol up, is that enough? You want Cecilia up here?
No, I think Carol is enough. These are just technical changes and maybe some clarifications.
Okay.
So Lori and I had some questions on the contract. If you turn to page 129 in the packet, it says the contract term is July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2022, with 2 additional one-year renewal options. And then it says the pricing is listed on the joiner agreement is effective January 1, 2020 through June 30, 2024, which implies that there is a new price list as of January 2020. But then if you go back to the Washoe County joiner contract, which is page 142, section 3.3, it says that the county agrees to pay the contractor in accordance with attachment C fee schedule and attachment D. These fees will remain firm for the duration of the initial term, 3-year term, which would end in June 30, 2022. Then a new fee schedule must be presented in writing to the Washoe County Purchasing and Managers Contract at least 45 days prior to the expiration of the 3-day contract period or renewal period. So there's some confusion here over what the pricing is going to be during that extension period. It's not clear. We're being asked to approve a fixed amount today for a price that we may not know. So we can't tell, Lori and I, if that new pricing has been presented and is effective from January 1, 2020 through 24, or if the underlying joiner contract prevails and they must provide a new price list at the end of the initial term. So for that reason, my preference is to only approve the contract through the initial term and bring it back once we know.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody? Okay. Motions are, why don't you make that, you do the motion, Supervisor.
Okay. I move to approve the joiner contract through June 30, 2022, and to authorize the purchasing and contracts. Nope, that's it. I approve to approve the joiner contract through June 30, 2022.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. Good catches. All right, we ready for the redevelopment authority? All right. We're going to recess the Board of Supervisors, and we're going to turn the gavel over to Supervisor, or I should say this, Mayor-elect Supervisor, Mayor-elect Bagwell, for who's chair of the redevelopment authority. Lori, here you go. Mayor-elect. Good. Good.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting of the Redevelopment Authority to order at 8:45. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Giammi. Here. Member Bonkowski. Here. Member Barrett. Here. Member Kroll.
Here.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on the line, Desi?
There is no public comment.
Okay, and any, I'm assuming Lee's going to go out to make sure I don't have general public comment before we, no general public comment? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to approval of the minutes of June 18th, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review those? So I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority for June 18th, 2020 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 18th, 2020. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We're now move on to item 16A, which is the discussion and action regarding appointment for 2 members for the Redevelopment Citizens Committee. One for the business operator for Area 1 that will expire on January of 2023, and one for the citizen at large, which is our partial term that will expire January 2021. Ms. Paulson, did you want to introduce our first candidate?
Our first applicant is Katie Bodden for the business operator or property owner position from Redevelopment Area 1.
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you've been through this before, so it won't be a surprise to you, but this one would be potentially a reappointment for you. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you've enjoyed serving on the redevelopment?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's been very enlightening to see the process and what happens and the things that we've been able to put through and the things that are still coming before us. So it'd be very exciting to continue to help serve.
So we'll go around and have people ask questions like we've done in the past. Mr. Mayor, we'll go first.
Katie's been there before. I'd just like to ask Katie a big general question. You're out and around the city quite a bit. How do you think we're doing on the COVID issues and other things in the city? I mean, just your thumbnail. Are we doing all right? Not doing all right? We need to crank up something?
I think everybody's doing the best that we possibly can to try and move this forward. Yes.
Thanks, Katie, for your service for the year. And it's going to happen again, I hope. So,
Thank you.
all right, I'm done.
Supervisor Bonkowski?
Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, Brad.
My question for you is, how do you think the RAC and the Redevelopment Authority are doing in their job? Do you see things where you think the direction we've been taking is appropriate, or do you see areas where maybe we should be focusing and doing better?
Well, again, I've just done this for, I think it's been about 6 months at best. But I think it's very important that we have the Citizens Advisory as well as the redevelopment board themselves so that we can all share those ideas and we get, feedback from the community itself so we can convey that to the board and work together for, the goodness going forward. Yeah.
Supervisor Giomi?
Thank you. Thanks again, Katie, for your time. If we can, for a second, think forward to a time when COVID isn't running our world. What's the most important project or initiative that still needs to be done in the redevelopment area?
Most important. Well, I think that, we've done so much going forward already and the downtown area is looking great. Maybe some of the areas a little bit further north, continuing that on so that the streamline is there. So I think just a continuing effort of, the whole Carson City area. I think we're doing a fabulous job. Going back, we all know 10 years ago, it was so blighted that now you look at it and it just sparkles. I mean, it just, people drive through. I have clients that come through and everybody just loves the walking area of downtown, the restaurants, the greenery, the Capitol, the grounds, the whole package. I think we're doing a phenomenal job.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Barrett?
Thank you, Supervisor. We served together on the RAC committee, and you've done a good job while we have been under this COVID thing for an extensive period of time. One of the issues that I've been concerned about during my term has been what I call cleanup of the downtown, and we have a contract to do that, but I'm still concerned, and our city manager can attest to the fact that I get on her a little bit about making sure downtown is clean. What can we do as the RAC and as the authority to upgrade the trash pickup, et cetera? And I know it's always a problem after a weekend or a big event, which we haven't faced for a while. So out of sight, out of mind, sort of, but it's never out of my mind. Spent a lot of money on the downtown, and it needs to be kept clean. You're right, people enjoy it, it's great, but it goes to seed after big events on the weekends. Got any ideas on that?
Well, I think that, we can draw the community. I think there's a lot of clubs in town, a lot of groups that would probably partake in doing the after cleanup, just like at Tahoe, the 4th of July, where the community goes in and cleans up the beaches, and because everybody wants to and take part in it. Why don't we reach out to some of those groups and see if they wouldn't want to participate in helping? I mean, it makes everybody feel good to participate after, a public gathering of some sorts, whatever it is, and just do it together.
Do you have any just final thoughts you'd like to share?
I would enjoy serving on the board longer. Like I said, I've just started, and so I'm, beginning to learn the practice of it. So I think it would be very enjoyable, and I'm willing to do so if I'm wanted to.
Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate your work on the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, thank you so much. Ms. Hill? Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming this morning and applying for this position. So how it works is we do just a series of questions, and then you'll have a final closing statement if you'd like or whatever, and then you're welcome to stay and watch the selection process if you'd like. So I'll just start off with, tell me what interests you about serving on the RAC.
I have been working in community development through the arts for over the past 6 years, and I think I have a proven track record of revitalization in the community, redevelopment, and proving that different vehicles can make an economic impact in the revitalization of any community. My family moved here in '77, so I have a strong connection to Carson City, so I thought I would formalize my relationship with the actual city of Carson City.
Oh, great, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor?
Sure. Gina, the question I'm going to have for you is, you got time to do this?
Yeah. Actually, the Brewery Arts Center is doing very, very well. And we just hired a full-time director of operations who will be running the on-site management of the BAC. So that frees me up. And the whole goal of that was to free me up to do more outside interaction with the community and do my role as the executive director instead of executive and operations a little bit better.
Well, I thought that the what do you call that with the band on the back of the truck?
The flatbed concert series.
Flatbed, yeah. I thought that was, somebody really had their head screwed on right, because that's a big help. When you see people, kind of enjoying life a little bit in difficult times. Brewery Arts Center, hats off to you folks for doing that. And I know you're doing other things down there. My sense is the Brewery Arts Center is rapidly becoming one of the premier art organizations and in Carson City. It never ceases to amaze me what all the things you guys do. So keep it up, and that's what I got for you.
Thank you. Actually, the city of Reno hired us to do the series for them too. So we're leading with creativity during this time of crisis.
That's very good.
Supervisor Bankowski?
Good morning, Gina.
Good morning.
My question for you is, looking at the direction that the Redevelopment Authority and the RAC have gone over the last 5 to 10 years. Give me your thoughts on what you think we have done right and where you think we need to focus and spend more attention and time.
Well, I think that you've done right in focusing on giving the business owners an opportunity with the facade program to improve the look and feel of the downtown core and other areas, the area 2 of redevelopment. I think that help is tremendous, especially in these times, and it has made a difference. You know, you look at our downtown and it's a model for others, and others are really duplicating what we are doing. And that's hats off to the redevelopment committee and the board of supervisors for that vision. I think that it's sometimes narrow, and the city is a little bit uninformed as to what that vision really is. You can see the debate about where we're going, and I think clear communication would be better. And serve the board better as far as rallying the citizens to stand behind everything that redevelopment is doing.
Supervisor Giomi?
Okay.
Oh, yes, absolutely, sorry.
I think that that's a really good point about the communication. If and when you figure out how that works, I would love to know, because I think that we spend a lot of time and effort with staff trying to get the word out. And I agree that we have not been ultimately successful in being able to do that. And I think that that's a combination of there not being enough outlets to put the word out and the public living their lives and not necessarily paying attention.
I think that a lot of being able to get into the community is a one-on-one thing. And you need to get into those little silos and really figure out how the community interacts, and not just on a broad level. We're telling you this and we want you to come here. We need to get into the bakeries, we need to get into the hair salons and figure out what people are actually thinking and wanting, and be able to communicate in a way that makes everybody, all citizens and all demographics, comfortable.
Supervisor Giomi?
Thank you. Thanks, Gina, for your time and interest in the position. If you can sort of think forward to a time when COVID's not an issue anymore, and relative to this position and the redevelopment authority, what is the most important project or initiative that still needs to be accomplished?
You know, I don't have that answer. I think we need to communicate with the citizens and really get feedback on what that is. I'm only one person. I come from a very narrow view, mine. So I would want to get a broader scope of what our community thinks needs to happen.
So may I follow that up? So practically speaking, what does that look like? How do we do that?
Just like what I was talking about. With,
I mean, to me, that still feels a little squishy.
It is squishy. These are people. So
I get that. I guess I'm saying that in an ideal world, I wouldn't disagree with you. Practically, I think it's very difficult with the staff we have and the limited numbers of people who are on the redevelopment authority to reach into all of those silos and do it in a way that we're ensuring we're not missing one of them. Mm-hmm. Because then we're disenfranchising people. So right. I guess I'm asking practically how you see that happening. Because I think objectively, it's a great goal to shoot for, but practically, I think it's very difficult to accomplish.
It is difficult, and it does take time, and that time comes through trust. You know, you build trust with your community, and they will rally, and they will talk, and they will start to, they have the answers. The answers are within this community, and they will relay them to you if they trust you and if they feel like you're going to listen to them. And I think building trust is the most important thing that we could do.
Thank you. Supervisor Barrett?
Thank you. Thank you for applying. Would you share with me your thoughts on downtown cleanup? It's something I've stressed during my 3.5 years on the board, that we've put millions into. Sorry. We've put millions into the downtown, and yet after an event on a weekend, it's tough because there's trash all over, people throw things. And then we do have a contract for cleanup, but it operates in a particular way. Do you have ideas you could bring to the RAC on how how to do a better job of cleaning up after big events and just generally.
Well, I'm not really sure how that goes, because when the Brewery Arts Center does a big event, we're responsible and solely responsible for our own cleanup. So I think that the organization benefiting from the event, the said event that is creating the trash, is responsible for that cleanup. I don't think that's too much to ask, and I think that would relieve the city of those duties as well. And then on Sunday morning, when we drive through downtown, we don't see trash everywhere, because the organization that had the event or that benefited from the event took care of that from the get-go.
Thank you.
So Gina, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us about anything? Why you want the position, or?
You know, I love this community. I've put a lot of time and effort into making it a community I want to live in, and I want to raise my family in. And I would really jump at the opportunity to serve on a more formal level.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay as we interview the last candidate and see how we make our decision. Thank you.
And that's all. Okay.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you this morning? Good. So I don't believe you've been through this process before.
No, I haven't been so
Okay,
fortunate.
so how it works is each of us will ask you a question that you can answer, and then you can even have a closing statement at the end, and then you're welcome to stay as you're the last candidate we're interviewing, and then we'll make our decision. So we'll start off with just in general. John, why don't you tell us why you'd like the position and what about RAC, inspires you to serve?
The thing that inspires me about the Planning Commission is the capabilities, I guess, or possibilities of expanding and helping Carson City grow. I'm the kind of person that thinks out of the box. If any of you know me, you know that's true. So I see different areas that I don't think have been explored or pushed to any degree, and I'd like to see those considered and possibly developed.
Can you give us an idea of one?
Sure. At the south end of town, there are 2 properties for sale at the intersection. I believe there's 2. I know there's at least 1 property for sale at the intersection of 50 and 395. And the nearest truck stop to Carson City is major truck stop is in Sparks, East Sparks. So that's a good 50, 60 miles away. Given the number of trucks that pass through here and the fact that there's virtually nothing on these properties at all, I think it's an ideal location to develop a truck stop there.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Good morning, John. How are you today?
Hi.
Good. Why don't you, while you got the microphone there, why don't you take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit more? We've all read your application. Tell us a little bit about yourself and just how long you've been here, what do you want to see done?
Okay.
Just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
My wife and I moved to Carson City in 2004. We built our house in Lakeview. We've been through both crises so far, the one in 2007 and now the one in 2018. My background is in engineering, manufacturing engineering, machinist, metalworking, plastics, that sort of thing, in the medical device field primarily. But I've worked on everything from spaceships to satellites and submarines. We lived in the Bay Area for about 30 years. My wife and I grew up in Minnesota. We intend to retire here, hopefully soon. This has kind of put a wrinkle in our plans, but I love this town. I love the feel of it. Everywhere I go, not only do I meet somebody, but I expect to see somebody that I know. So that's a good feeling. You don't get that in a lot of places. I see that it's handicapped by a lack of space. We're locked in pretty tight on there. So I'd like to see us explore opportunities to repurpose some of the land, maybe even acquire some of the land from the state and the federal that's not being used. And that's kind of what my focus would be. And that also, I'm sorry, I'm bringing commercial and industrial industries to town.
You know, is your email address, what's the username on your email address? Is it,
It's nothing fancy. I had to change it and I couldn't think of anything fast, so it's my name with a dot in the middle and my birth year at the end. So,
well, the reason I asked that is I've run into, got an email from, there was a John Sullivan who applied. Let's see here just a second. Who was a school teacher here for a long time.
oh, it wasn't me.
Anyway, and then I saw your application, another John Sullivan, and there's another John Sullivan around Carson City. I can't remember who that was, but you're in good company around here.
Well, I'm hoping I'm the one you like.
Very good.
Okay.
Let me ask you one last question here.
Sure.
Just for my information. What brought you to Carson City to move here?
My wife and I looked a lot of different places. We were tired of California. We were trying to get out of it, trying to get out of the rat race in the Bay Area. And we looked in, we looked in Hawaii, we looked in Utah, Arizona, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. And we had a business at one time that brought us up this way several times. I was becoming a little bit familiar with the area. And just really, I've been fascinated by the history of Carson City. As a coin collector, it was always fascinating to have a mint right in your backyard, so to speak. But we saw this property and walked around a little bit and just fell in love with the views, fell in love with the feel of the community. And it's been a great place to live.
Very good. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, a little delayed. Welcome to Carson City. 16 years late, but we're glad to have you
I
here.
would have got here sooner, but
Okay.
Supervisor Bonkowski.
Good morning, John.
hi, Brad.
First, a clarification. You said in your opening remarks that you were interested in serving on the Planning Commission
Yeah.
and working to help direct growth. Just want to be clear, this is not an interview for the Planning Commission. This is
Okay.
for Redevelopment Authority.
I understand, yeah. I do
Okay,
understand.
just wanted to make sure that you're in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
Okay, my question for you is, looking at the direction that the Redevelopment Authority and the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee has taken over the last 5 to 10 years, what do you think they've done right? And where do you believe that they should be focusing and directing their energies in areas that they haven't met yet?
Well, I have to assume that the downtown project was part of the redevelopment. And I have to also say, at first I wasn't that keen on it, but it's worked out pretty well, I think. So I think that was a job well done and necessary. So I'd like to see areas in the north end of town where I live redeveloped or repurposed, land that isn't being used at all right now. And for whatever reason, that's an area I'd like to see worked on. I'd like to see, I don't know the possibilities of it, but I'd like to see some efforts directed towards redeveloping the airport area as industrial base, and some other areas like that.
By chance, have you looked at the boundaries of the redevelopment areas, Area
No,
1
I have
and 2?
not. I have not.
Okay, I would suggest that you do that, just so that you're aware of the jurisdiction that you would be advising on as part of the committee. The airport is outside of that. It's generally along 395 from north to
395
south.
and, okay, north and south?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Supervisor Giomi.
Sullivan, thank you for applying and putting your name out there for consideration. If we sort of think forward to a time when COVID isn't an issue anymore, what do you think the most important project or initiative is that still needs to be accomplished in the redevelopment area?
Well, I'm not sure if that covers redevelopment or what Brad was talking about earlier, but I think anything that we can do to incentivize commercial development and industrial development in this town is essential. We are landlocked, as you know, and we have to make the best use of what we have. Did that answer the question?
Thank you. He has no right or wrong answer, so yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Barrett?
Thank you, and thank you as well for applying. I've been an advocate while I've served on this board of making sure, as you noted, we have now a new downtown that's really great, but that we clean up after events and we clean it up regularly. There is a contract, which there's a complicated way to fund that, and it happens on I won't call it an irregular basis, it's actually a regular basis, but there's space between. I'm mostly concerned about how it looks, not just along the corridor of 395 or Carson Street, but back a couple of blocks from that, because what happens is we have an event, not during the COVID, but we used to have events,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
will again. And then there's just a lot of junk that gets thrown away by people who are drinking or not thinking or whatever they're doing.
Both.
And I wonder if you have ideas how the Redevelopment Authority Citizen Committee could recommend to the Redevelopment Authority that we handle that. This board serves as the Redevelopment Authority, and the commission you're going on, which I happen to be the board member who serves on that, advises. So do you have ideas on how we could take that, let's say, go up to the next level on keeping our pristine downtown pristine all the time?
Or a wider area of pristineness?
Sorry?
Or said, or a wider area of pristineness?
Well,
Something like
as I say, the corridor is good, and our contract works
Yeah.
at that. Cleans it up on a regular basis. But after we have an event, why,
Yeah, there's debris all over the
it's
place.
a tough
measured
go. It seems to me kind of strange. We have an $11 million downtown and a 50-cent way of taking care of it afterwards.
The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is highly visible trash containers on each corner. I've been to many Nevada Day parades. I find it a really wonderful event. It was one of the things that appealed to me moving here. But there is, as you said, a lot of drinking and a lot of not thinking. They kind of go together. So I don't think people necessarily litter intentionally. And I think if they can see trash cans more visible on the corners, that they're more likely to use them. It's not going to solve everything, but it would, I think it would make a big difference.
Thank you.
Okay. John, did you want to make some final comments about why you'd like to serve, or?
Well, I would like to give back to the community. I like living here, and like I said, I think there's some changes, not changes necessarily, but just some focus points that that we need to look at to make this city grow. We're stifled. We have some major issues. You guys are all aware of them. Every week you face them. And I think I can bring a fresh perspective to the redevelopment area. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you so much, again, for applying. All of you did a superior job, and so our decisions are difficult. So thank you, and I'm going to bring it back up to the board right now to see who wants to start with the recommended appointments. Anybody want to take the first stab? You're done. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you just press it. Thank you so much, John. Anybody want to start?
I have a question of Dan, potentially, if he's engaged. Are you with us, Dan? Okay. Can anyone of the three be considered for the citizen at large? Or are the applications specific to the individual seat that they applied for?
That's an easy question for me to answer, and the answer is yes. Let me say that again, because that was a compound question.
Thank you.
Good start.
That was a very lawyer-like answer. Thank you very much.
I could have said it depends, right?
You could have, that would have been even better.
No, that's a good question. This is something that I've talked to Nancy and Lee both about prior to today's meeting. There's nothing in the rules, there's nothing in CCMC or otherwise that would restrict this board, from appointing just the person who's applying for a very specific position. So, in other words, yes, this board may consider appointing to somebody to a position other than the specific position that the person applied for.
As long as they qualify for it.
As long as they qualify for it,
Correct.
yes.
I got that part.
Well,
I just
the
wanted to note-
citizen at large doesn't.
Lee Plumble Community Development Department, we looked online, and actually, so the online application only allows them to pick one. It's not multiple choice that they qualify, if they qualify for two, they have to pick one online when they submit their application. So that's how it comes to you, even though they may qualify for multiple positions.
Oh, okay, I get that. So your comment is not in conflict with Dan's then?
Well, and to further that, I mean, I think I've talked about that, so we may change the application so that it is check each that apply rather than a drop-down menu where you can only pick one is probably the appropriate way to do it for this situation, but that's not the way the application is set up currently, so they had to pick one when
Okay,
submitting the application.
understand, thank you. So he did not offer a conflicting opinion from you, did he?
No, Lee did not offer a conflicting opinion.
And I know
think he
Lee
was-
is educated, but I'm not sure what law school he went to, but I just,
Yeah, no, I think Lee was just simply commenting for the
Okay,
record
perfect.
that there's a
Thank you.
procedural issue with the way the forms are currently put in place.
Got it.
So I'll
Got
go
it.
back to multitasking now.
okay, thank you. I will, if you'll allow me, since I have the mic, make a recommendation, or at least express an opinion. I think all three of the candidates did a great job. And while I appreciate Mr. Sullivan's thoughts, and in fact share a lot of them relative to our development of industrial land and work at the airport, I think that's better focused to other committees. So I would choose Katie Bawden, who just got on the redevelopment authority for the business operator, and suggest Gina for the citizen at large to fill the vacancy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baumkowski?
Yeah, I think that Stacy pretty much read my thoughts. To Mr. Sullivan, I think based on your comments and your initial description, the committee appointments that I think you would find most interesting would be either the Planning Commission or the Airport Authority, rather than the Redevelopment Authority. I am very hesitant to put somebody on a committee for 6 months and then pull them off. So Ms. Bowden, I would recommend retaining her. Gina has a lot of experience in the redevelopment area already. I think I'd give her a slight edge as far as giving her a chance. So I am going to agree 100% with Stacy's recommendations.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, what I think, I don't know who said it, but I think, thanks to all three of you for applying. I think everybody knows that, both the Board of Supervisors and the Redevelopment Authority, we all depend upon the boards that they provide advice. It's not necessarily something where, let me just say that they're important positions. And I think, John, as you see things go along in the community, I happen to agree with Supervisor Baumkowski that there are other jobs, other positions out there. I know the airport would be one. But, given what I've heard today, my sense is that, we normally reappoint someone who's, just been appointed. And Gina is, she's all over this town. I mean, she's just all over the town. So my sense is I go along with what Supervisor Giomi said.
Mr. Barrett, did you want to comment, or are we irrelevant?
Yeah,
Or
I'll
both.
comment that I'm irrelevant, obviously, but I'm not sure I totally agree with the analysis of our attorney, but I always follow our attorney's advice. And I found Lee Plemmel's testimony from the Community Development Directorship informative. I, of course, came in thinking this was, the way, they were in the lanes they were in. But I will just go with the majority of the board since I already have no choice.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, so again, what I want to say is how fortunate Carson City is to even have engaged residents. And I really enjoyed some of the discussion about how do we engage more in the process. And I think I agree with everyone up here. It's not as easy as it sounds. You just communicate and they will come out and they will rally, because I just don't think it's that easy. Maybe we don't reach enough associations that have broader people that they can communicate with to help us. But I feel very fortunate today that all three of you applied for these positions and we're in good shape. And John, this was your first try at coming before a board, and you did a fine job. And like the others, I recommend that you really keep watching for the boards, because it sounds to me like your interest is really in one of our other two committees that might really pique your interest and be something that you can really contribute a lot to the process for the taxpayers and the residents of Carson City. So again, just thank you. But so I'll take a motion. Somebody want to?
I got it. I move to appoint Katie Bodden to fill the vacancy for the business operator or property owner position from Redevelopment Area 1 for a term expiring January 2023, and Gina Hill to fill the vacancy for the citizen at-large position for the partial term expiring January 2021.
I have a motion and a second for the appointment of Katie Bodden for the January 2023 position, and Gina Hill for the one expiring January 2021. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And again, thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, we go to final public comment for the Redevelopment Authority.
I see no final public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, so there's no final public comment. Then if there's no objection, I will adjourn the Redevelopment Authority and pass the gavel back to the esteemed mayor.
All right, we're going to bring the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. Let's take up item number 20. This is for discussion and only. This is discussion and presentation regarding the water supply picture for the Carson River watershed. This is presented by Ed James. We get this once a year, I think, Ed. And it's always very informative. So let's hear what you have to say. Good. I can hear you better. I got you.
Thank you. For the record, Ed James with the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District. And as the mayor had mentioned, I try to do these updates about every year or 18 months to give you a broad perspective of what's going on in the total watershed. You guys know pretty much what's going on in Carson City. An idea is what's happening to your neighbors and what's happening in the whole watershed. So what I want to cover today is basically a couple items. I am going to go over some of the groundwater resource or groundwater levels, kind of give you an update of where we stand. It's kind of a good indication if we're healthy or not in our groundwater levels. Now, and these are just summaries. Now, a lot of times you can find specific wells that may be different. Well, basically, we looked at over 150 wells and grouped them and said this is what the conditions are in these areas. So I'm just going to go through a few of these. Then I'm going to talk about the groundwater production and the different groundwater basins, what's happening out there. Then I'll talk about the municipal water use as they're going on and how they're doing. I'll talk a little bit about the stream flow on the Carson, and then kind of a summary of some water issues that we see that we need to start addressing. So with that, first we'll start with the groundwater levels. I'm going through the entire watershed here. And I'm going to start first in South Carson Valley area. This is the south part of Carson Valley, more in the central area. And you can see from this graph, and again, there's several wells out there, but they all have the same indication that the water levels are not dropping. We're not mining in this area, and it seems to be fairly healthy. This is the Ruhenstroth area. This is a concern we have. You'll note that the water table has been dropping significantly over the years, and then they settled off. What we don't know is if it's because of the wet years. This is totally fed, this area, by the pine nuts. And so we've had quite a bit of precip and the pine nuts flowing down. So this may be settling out, or it may be continuing to drop. The biggest thing is there's no municipal water use around there, and these are all domestic wells that are pulling on it. And so it's a domestic well issue that's out here in this community. So we'll be monitoring this in the Douglas County area. This is the Garden River Ranchos, GID, several wells. You can see that this fluctuates quite a bit, but again, the height of this is not significant. But during the dry years, which were in 14, 15, and 16, you can see that the water level had dropped, but then they did recover during the wet years. And these are things that you want to look at. Going to the middle Carson, this is basically in the middle area that is fed by the Carson River, and you can see that the water table has been pretty steady over the period of time here. And a lot of wells indicate that. And that's typical because you're irrigating constantly out there, and so the water levels do stay pretty steady. This is on the east side of Carson Valley, around the Johnson Lane area, and this is a concern. You'll see from here that the water levels have been dropping in the Johnson Lane area, and there are several wells in there. This, again, is due to the domestic wells. The lower part of Johnson Lane is actually on the municipal water system, but the upper part further east is all on domestic wells. And we are seeing an impact on that, and we're also seeing an impact because there's septics out there with nitrates. And so these are concerns that we are seeing in the Douglas County area. Now focusing on the Eagle Valley Basin, I'll first go to the west side. And these are a couple wells that you'll see on the west side here. You can see it pretty steady. The lower one shows you that we did have some, when during the wet years, there's quite a bit after, especially the flood came up, it did drop down, but it settled out. What's interesting, in the upper one, you can see that the initial point was much higher and then dropped. And this is typical when you put a well in. In fact, there's other places in Carson where people said, hey, the water level has been dropped down significantly. But then if you look now, the water levels have steadied out. And it's because probably there was a perched water table that was there. And when it was finally drilled, it was pulled on. It wasn't really much water there. And then it hit a new equilibrium. So this is the northwest Eagle Valley area. And you can see from this graph that the water levels during dry years dropped down a bit. You had these wet periods, popped up, some dry years, and then popping back up. I will mention that you probably will not see as much change like these in the future, and I'll talk about more of that with the production, but Carson City is not pulling as hard from Eagle Valley as it did historically because you are now getting water from Carson Valley. So you will not see these dips as much as you do today. Going with Essential. This one here is near, let's see. This is more the central area. Wrong file here. But again, you're seeing the water tables bouncing up and down, but in pretty good shape. So again, indicating that you're not mining the groundwater basin. Same with this site and with this site. So what it generally tells me is generally, if you look at the groundwater basins in Eagle Valley, the water tables are fairly steady or not declining, and that's a concern. A lot of times, if you see a water table dropping, that means that you're mining those resources. And then in the south part, again, you can see these during some dry year periods, it drops significantly and then pulled back up. There may be some other stories going on around this area here, but again, bottom line is the water tables are doing quite well. Here's a few in the Dayton area, and when you look at the Dayton, they have a lot of monitoring wells out there, but just one of them, and their water levels have been steady. Stagecoach, this is a sub-basin of the Dayton groundwater basin. We're interested in this one because this may be a potential groundwater recharge in the future. And you can see that from this well, the water levels were dropping significantly and are now rebounding. And the reason for this rebound is that the turf farm is no longer operating out there. If you remember the turf farm, when you went by, they were pulling a lot of water, and you can actually see that they were basically mining the aquifer, pulling it down. But since they've stopped operations, the groundwater basin is rebounding. This is some of the other areas in the Stagecoach, and you can see that the water levels have been declining a bit out there. It is a concern that we're looking, again, most of these are due to domestic wells, not to the municipal wells, but we may be looking at this area as a recharge in the future. So this would give us opportunities to recharge it and store water in this groundwater basin. Silver Springs, which is the Churchill Valley groundwater basin, and we're seeing some pretty good consistencies out there. The dry year periods in this period did pull down, but again, we saw a recharge during the wet years. And then this is what I call the Carson Desert groundwater basin. I'm focusing on the Fallon area here, but it's a much larger groundwater basin. This is the basalt aquifer. This is where the city gets its water, the Navy base, and the tribe out there. You'll notice in the top graph that the water levels were dropping significantly over the years. However, this monitoring well went out of production or out of monitoring in 2003. So we have to go to another monitoring well, and you can see actually that period of time there has been a recovery. And part of that is we're seeing less production out there. And this is a trend we're seeing in most municipalities. They're not pumping as much water as they did historically. So now what I want to do is kind of focus on groundwater production. This is kind of critical because most of the entities, except for Carson, really depend upon the groundwater resources. We have hired Loomis and Associates. They are doing a study for us on looking at sustainability, water marketing, and also potential storage sites in the watershed. This is one of the graphs they put together for us in our study. And what this shows is basically the PY is perennial yield. And a perennial yield is basically what is the annual recharge you would see in that groundwater basin. I don't know if it's the best indication because there's some other things going on, but this is what's used by the state engineer right now. So the perennial yield out in Carson Valley is about 49,000. You can then see how the water is being allocated. This is based over a 5-year period. The orange is irrigation use, and the green is municipal use, and then we have the blue is domestic. If you go to Eagle Valley, you can see the perennial yield is 4,900. However, there's also a ruling by the state engineer that you have what they call the safe yield or system yield. And this includes some of the recharge you get from Ash and Kings Canyon that comes into your groundwater basin. You can see that your biggest use is your municipal use. Dayton Valley, they have a range now from 8,000 to 20,000. They're currently using about 8,000. Municipal use is quite big. Irrigation also fluctuates, but you can see that they are within the perennial yield mostly. Ones that are not within the perennial yield, like Churchill Valley, which is Silver Springs area, their perennial yield is 1,600. They're currently pumping about 2,500, but you can see the majority of it is domestic wells. So domestic wells make up of that 2,500 almost over 1,500 acre-feet of water. When you get to the Carson Desert, you'll see the perennial yield is 2,500, but they're pumping over 17,000. And that's the Churchill County area. But again, if you look at what's happening out there, they get a lot of recharge from agriculture, which is not considered in the perennial yield. So that's why sometimes perennial yield is not a very good indicator of how much water you really have available for your resources. Over here is a summary of what's happening in each of the groundwater basins. And the bars are the total amount of groundwater pumped. And you'll see in Carson Valley, it really fluctuates depending on the weather and how much water is in the river. It's a little hard to see here, but this blue line is the agricultural use. So when things are wet, they don't pump much. But when it's dry, they have a lot of supplemental wells that pump more. But so you can see that there's definitely a fluctuation going on here. But no year have they come close to the perennial yield. The municipal use is pretty steady through here. In fact, it's starting to decline a little bit, which is pretty amazing because actually these last couple of years, Carson City has now started taking water from the Minden wells. So that additional production is included, so there is actually less groundwater being pumped for municipal use in this area. And this is actually common throughout the entire West. We're seeing less water being used through all the municipalities. A good example is Clark County, that is no longer now pursuing the water on the East Valley, eastern part of Nevada, because they realize they can now meet their demands locally with their allocations. And if you look at that in Clark County, when I first got here in the early 2000s, they were using almost over 300,000 acre feet of water of their allocation. And now they've been able to knock that down to under 280,000. They've been actually banking some of their water in other places. So again, conservation has really changed the picture of how we're using water. Eagle Valley, you can see here, and you're seeing actually a trend going down, and this again is because Carson City is now taking less water out of Eagle Valley. So you're seeing that trend going down over the years here. Dayton, we do have agriculture, so when again it's dry, you'll see, and wet years down, and when it's dry coming through, but their domestic well or municipal well use is actually pretty steady, and it's actually declined a little bit. And then in Silver Springs, again, the same thing. You're seeing this going through here. However, this bar here is the domestic wells, and those are not going to change much. So that's a big use down there. This data came from the state engineer. They have a pumping report that they produce every year. However, they do not produce one in the Churchill County area, so I don't have a report there. So let's look at the municipal water use. Oops. This again was another graph, a report that Loomis did for us. And this shows the municipal water systems. This shows the connections, how much water is being used, and the average acre feet per connection, which is over here. And this is not to show who's wasting water or anything like this. It's just how the water is being used throughout the area. This is an average use. So one of the things that's a little complicated when you do this is they took the total water use. So if you have a lot of parks or schools and a small user base, it may show your use going up more because they've incorporated all that use into per connection. So if you have more connections and fewer parks, you may actually see a lower water use. But it does show as you move down through the watershed, especially when you go down lower areas, and it makes sense in these smaller communities down here, they have smaller lots. They are not using as much water. But this is your typical water use that we're seeing through the communities. This here is Carson City's, and you have one of the more complicated systems in the watershed because you have multiple sources. And it's just, you can see a lot of different sources coming through. You have Marlette water, you have surface water. You used to actually take water with the city or the state. There was surface water, that treatment stopped in '99. You take surface water from the river, you have induction wells, you take water from the Dayton Valley groundwater basins, Carson Valley, you have your own water rights. You also have the intertie with Minden, Lakeview, and then Eagle Valley. So, but if you look at it, what I'd like to show here is your trend is also showing here. Your overall water demands have been dropping for the last several years. And so you're being more efficient with your water resources today than you have historically. So stream flows. This is something I want to bring because, again, as we start talking, we talked about groundwater, what's happening along the river. And this is kind of interesting. This, again, was another one put together by Loomis. And what they did was they looked at the trend lines at the different gauges. One at the west fork at Woodford's and the east fork near Gardnerville. We look at these because this is basically very little upstream development. So this is kind of what Mother Nature is providing us through the watershed. So what is happening with Mother Nature coming in? And what's interesting, on the West Fork, we're seeing over since 1940 to 2018, a negative 7.9% decrease in flows. So we are seeing an impact on flows to the system. On the East Fork, we're seeing a negative 4% If you average to 2, it comes out to be about 4.88. There's a lot more flow on the East Fork than on the West Fork. When you come to the Carson City gauge and you look at this compared to the upper watershed, you're seeing a negative 8.99. So this one is also dealing with Carson Valley. So we see that reduction coming in from Mother Nature, but there is something else going on in Carson Valley that is impacting the flows in the system. What's kind of interesting is, though, if you go down to Fort Churchill, it's now negative 3.7, which is less than what we're losing from Mother Nature. So there, again, there's something happening in that reach that actually is increasing flows than we had historically going down through the system. So this here is gauge data. I took basically the Carson City gauge and I minus what the East and West Fork. And you can see, and I also put a trend line, kind of a 10-year trend line to see what's going on. What's interesting is you can see, it's typical, and of course you would expect this with all the agriculture in Carson Valley, less water coming out because you're going to irrigate and it's being consumed. And this is a typical trait going through. What I thought was interesting is you're seeing this trend here in the 2000s jumping up significantly. In fact, 2009 is almost 110,000 acre feet, quite a bit of water. And so the question is, what is going on there? But then also I looked down here at the Churchill County area, did the same thing, took the Churchill County flow minus Carson City, because you do have irrigation going on. You'll see that early on there was a lot of irrigation and that trend, but you're not seeing that impact like you see up here. So something is occurring in the system. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'm still looking at it. I sometimes question maybe the gauges are not quite accurate. So we're looking at the gauge data. We're also going to be looking at monthly flows. These are things that we'll be investigating, going through to try to evaluate. But we do look at some of the diversions in this area. And this is the diversions in the upper Carson River. This is maintained by the Federal Water Master. This is in Carson Valley. The problem with this data is that they're only measuring about 30% of the ditches. So we really don't have a good feel for what's happening up there. It's been bouncing around here, but there may be some time delays. So are we drawing water down? Does it take a couple years for dry years to recover from wet years? These are some of the studies that we need to look at. In the lower Carson, they do measure most of the ditches. And we are seeing a steady trend downward. There are a lot of ditches that have been taken out of production over the years. And so we do see a steady decline here. And so this is probably why you're seeing that recovery down at the Fort Churchill. Why is this important? If you're in Churchill County, you're very concerned about what's happening upstream of you. And they are very concerned about all this groundwater and development upstream of them. And so they want to ensure that the water that they are legally entitled to comes down. And so that's some of the things that we're working with them to ensure that any kind of development, that it's not adversely affecting the amount of water that they have entitled to them. And at this point, things look pretty good. And it's probably due to the reduction in agriculture here. So finally, what are some of the issues? We know that there's a lot of water issues still we're dealing with. Groundwater, surface water interactions. Everyone has water rights, but how much of these water rights are really wet water versus paper water? These are concerns. In the Silver Springs area, they have a lot of paper water. They have over 9,000 acre feet of paper water. You can't drink paper water very well. And so the idea is, how are you going to deal with it? This is a question the state engineer has to do because they allocated these water years ago to people, so people have water rights, and yet there's no wet water behind them. There's a big study going on the Humboldt dealing with groundwater pumping upstream of Lovelock. And Lovelock has the senior water rights on the river. They are concerned that this groundwater pumping upstream is impacting flows to them. So there is a big study going on conducted by the state engineer and DRI. The outcome of that could have impacts on how you minister groundwater basins and rivers in the future. So we're keeping track of that. And then the bottom line is, what is the way, how much water do you really have? Is a perennial yield a proper analysis? Or is there another scenario we should be using? So CWSD is going to be working on putting a workshop together. We're still trying to figure out how you do a virtual workshop, but this is something we're going to be struggling with. But basically bringing the community together to look at these issues. We'll bring people from the state engineer's office, the federal water master, and others, and really start diving into these questions a little more to ensure that we have an adequate water supply for the future. And this is one of our goals. I'm hoping to have this workshop sometime in October, and we would let everyone know at that time if you're interested in participating. Again, we're just trying to work out the details of how do you do this with a large group and to bring the experts in to talk about these real issues. That is all I have. It's a quick, dirty overview, less than an hour, Brad. So, but really kind of give you just an overview of what's happening in the watershed. And I would say generally we are in pretty good shape, healthy-wise, and I think that as long as we stay ahead of the curve, we have water for the future too.
Questions of Ed? Brad?
Ed, I don't know why I've never talked to you about this before, but how is a recharge basin protected if you locate it in an area where domestic wells are mining the aquifer?
Well, one of the things you have to look at is, where you're putting the water from, how much water you're putting in. If there's a mining occurring, you would have to recharge that. Do they reduce it, or do they have to buy water if they're going to be there just to bring it back up to equilibrium? But the amount of water that's being used out there is pretty small. So it's not like a huge amount of water. So I think there's some of the things that we have to look into more detail. But if you have a basin, what you want to do is you want to have a basin that's farther enough away from the river that when you put water in there, when you pull it out, it's still there. There was a study done back in the 80s looking at a whole bunch of potential storage sites in Douglas County. The problem is every time you put water in, 2 years later, the water will be back to the river. So you really have to identify that. The other question is the chemical reaction. Sometimes when you bring in a different source of water into a groundwater basin, there's a reaction with the chemical makeup of the rocks and everything, and you can actually cause problems there. And then also you don't want to put it in places that have high nitrates or high arsenic. So these are studies that we have to do. So we're still looking at opportunities there. But places that we're going to be looking at, this is what Loomis is doing, is where does it have storage capacity, ability to be compatible with the system, and making sure there's not contamination in front of that. So these are some of the ideas coming into it. But that will be looked into further.
Go.
Ed, have you read any studies relative to groundwater recharging about injecting wastewater into recharge basins? Is anyone really doing that? I know Carson City sort of has a infiltration permit, but I mean actively doing that. And do you see that as a potential long-term solution?
There is possibilities. I know that the state just recently would call, I think, Class A+ wastewater. And I know up in Reno, they are looking at those opportunities of treating it to a higher level and putting it into the ground. This has been done throughout Southern California. When I worked down there, we actually had quite a bit of water being pumped in. And Orange County Sanitation District was doing quite a bit of work, a lot of treatment. It's fairly expensive because the level you want to put in, you want to make sure you're not contaminating your groundwater resources. And I don't think that that the cost justifies that at this point. You have plenty of, other places you could use the water for agriculture, offsetting, irrigation uses. It's probably more cost-effective at this point. It may change in the future, but at this point, I think you'd be better off just using it for agriculture or green belts and saving your fresh water.
One more comment, if I can, Mayor. The Carson Water Subconservancy District is, and Ed particularly recently got recognized. I'm going to have Ed bring it up because he'll describe the organization better. But the CWSD is really sort of standing out in the West and really in the world, or in the country, I should say, in cooperative efforts at managing groundwater basins and managing water. And really, it's a remarkable organization when you think about it, because it's a bi-state organization, multiple counties in the state of Nevada and California. And so I'll acknowledge Ed's contribution to that, obviously as the leader of the organization. But Ed, if you could just briefly tell us what that award was, and I know you don't like to brag, but since I forced you into it,
Okay.
you're
Well,
going to
thank
have to now.
And I just found this out yesterday, and I have not officially got it yet, but I was told yesterday that I've been nominated as the floodplain manager of the year for 2020 for the California and Nevada section of the Floodplain Managers Association. I was surprised to even get it. I didn't even know, but I guess my staff had been working with others on this nomination. And I was a little surprised at first, taken back by it, but I realized if you look at what we've done at CWSD, we are studying a lot of new things going on, especially with FEMA and flood mapping. With our technical cooperative partnership that we've been doing, we've now set up a new process with FEMA's looking at doing throughout the country, where you have one entity managing the grants, but doing multiple projects. So that's what we do. And so in Carson City, a lot of these flood studies are going on. Instead of Carson City having to do this and doing the management, also the grant, which, trust me, when you get FEMA grants, there's a lot of management to do. We're able to get multiple ones, handle one site, but then the counties, Douglas, Carson, Lyon, are able to really do the studies they want to do without having to do the paperwork pushing. FEMA's like that so much because it's more efficient for them, because you don't have then 5 different entities having a multiple administration going on, but just one. We've also done some of this regional water floodplain management. When we started doing the mapping of the floodplain, in the past, FEMA was really focused just on by counties, and we started looking at the entire watershed. So this new flood mapping we did from basically Alpine County to Lahontan Reservoir incorporated the entire watershed floodplain. And now you can see what impacts are up and down. So if something goes on in Douglas County, we can run the model and see what the impact is all the way through the system. So we've been very active in there and outreach. But I also have to say it's also not just CWSD, but it's also the counties we work with. If you look at it, we have really set a model of working cooperatively. So with Carson City staff, Douglas County, Lyon County, Story, all the counties involved, really shows that a watershed can come together and really reduce flood risks by working cooperatively. And I think that's why I'm getting recognized by that, but it really is the efforts that was done by CWSD and the counties that have been involved that really is the reason why I think I'm getting this award. But it is kind of a great honor. I didn't expect it, so.
Supervisor Barrett, sorry.
Thank you. And thanks to Brad and Stacy, who serve with the Subconservancy as the representatives from this board. It's very important, especially in the West. I came here from Nebraska, where water is important, and for the Omaha World Herald, I covered the agencies in Lincoln that took care of water. And I had the great pleasure when I got here, after going to work for the Nevada Appeal, of going on Ed's tour of the whole basin for the Carson River. I learned a lot on that. So we are really fortunate by great leadership, both from our board and in Ed and his staff. I did have a question that comes from your presentation. You made the point that out in Silver Springs they have wet water and paper water, and they got more paper water than they do wet water. And you also made the point in your presentation that Carson City looks in pretty good shape. We know we have paper water here as well. Is ours backed up better? And how do we look going forward on that front?
Yeah, I would say, for the record, Ed James with Carson Water Subconservancy, and your staff probably could give you the more specific numbers, but looking at it, you do have some paper water in Eagle Valley, but you don't need it all, which is nice. So you've actually are working within the wet water you have, and that's the important element there. You also have different sources to be pulling on. So I would say that if you look at your overall water supply that you have developed on the books, you definitely have wet water to meet the future growth, probably for the next 10 to 20 years plus. So you're in really good shape there. And again, if your water conservation trends continue the way they're going, that's just saving your water. And that's, I think, real important. The one thing I really do want to point out, a couple things too, is I was in Colorado last week on a tour, a vacation kind of work tour. And I stopped at the sign and they talked about this community, how they switched over from flood irrigation to sprinkler and drip irrigation, saving all this water. But then at the bottom of the sign, they said, and because of this, we've now developed another 36,000 acres of irrigated lands. Well, I thought, well, you really haven't saved the water, you're just now spreading it over somewhere else. And that's always a concern, that sometimes you save the water and then you stress it somewhere else. And I think it's important that as you save that water, you don't stretch it, that you continue to save that water. And I think you see that, and I have not seen any plans from Carson City that says, okay, we now are pumping less water, so we're going to now stretch it somewhere else. That's important. The other thing that's real important too is, I've been talking a lot about municipality use, but it really is a balancing act. You have water for agriculture, the environment, and municipal use. In all our planning, it's important that you keep all three of those healthy. Because if you don't, you're going to lose the lifestyle that you've come to appreciate in this area. And so, especially in Carson Valley, a really big one there, they always say we're running out of water. Well, they got plenty of water if they wanted to build, but as soon as you do that, you won't have the agriculture and you won't have the environment. So it really is a balancing act that I think the communities as a whole always need to continue to consider.
Thank you for that, and that shows you again why we have great leadership, because as Ed said, we work with all the counties surrounding us and our own people here at Public Works. I think that speaks well for the situation we face. And I would add that we were talking earlier regarding RAC and other matters, how tough it is in a community where you have a 2-day-a-week newspaper and online, et cetera. We don't have the outlets, say, that Reno has with 3 television stations, although maybe that's a plus rather than a minus. But at any rate, we need to get the word out on this, because there are a lot of people in this community who think we're water, And it's important that we continue the way we're going, but we're going in the right direction, and I hope we can get that word out.
So Ed, thank you so much for your presentation. Can you give me a few ideas that we can share with the public, how we're conserving the water? How are we able to drive the usage rates down that I can see across most of your slides? So what are the municipalities doing? What more can we do?
There's several reasons why that's occurring. A big one is when I first moved here to Carson, I noticed that the growth at that time was about 1.5%. But the water use was going up 3 to 4%. And that's because everyone was moving in with the bigger lots. And I'm one of the culprit of that. Put a lot of lawn in, and the water use was going up. Well, over the years, my kids are gone. I don't want to cut as much grass. So I've been reducing my lawn. And you'll see around the Carson, you'll see that quite a bit too. Part of it's driven by price. As cost goes up, people are saying, how can I reduce my water bill? And so they're reducing that. So you're seeing that actually a lot of lawns, and even the new homes now have less lawns going in to the area. So that's probably the biggest one, and that's the biggest savings. The other thing, of course, is you have more water efficient toilets, showers, everything else. What's kind of interesting, if you look at over the years, the only water shortage that Carson City has faced in the last 10 years is less reclaimed water. At one point, you had a lot of your parks using reclaimed water and everything else. And all of a sudden, conservation came in, and your reclaimed water sources went down, and yet you put your parks back onto fresh water. So we're seeing that kind of reduction, too, on that. So I think all of those are playing a part of it. If you remember, in 2015 was a very bad drought. California was really hurting, and everyone could see that. Truckies was hurting a little bit, so they were having this voluntary 10% cutback. If you look in this watershed, we were in pretty good shape. There really was no water shortage, but the message was going out there. Be cautious, conserve, voluntarily if you can cut back. People did. And actually, I was more than 10% savings throughout this whole watershed, but there wasn't that rebound. And again, a lot of that was probably a permanent, changing lawns and stuff like that. So that is what's occurring, and I think if you look at most homes today, you don't see as much lawns out there. So that's the efficiency that people are seeing.
So Ed, before you go, this is associated with your work at Carson Water Subconservancy, but not based on the groundwater, and that's LID development standards, which we've talked about, and I'm glad that Darren and Lee are both here. So right now, CWSD is working in conjunction with the counties to bring forward LID development standards, and some counties, which I believe Carson is one, would prefer to have an ordinance where they would be mandated and not voluntary. So that's some other work that we're doing in partnership, and that also will help a lot with conservation and continuing to trend water usage down. And for those that are not familiar with low-impact development, it would be using catch basins or the design in your landscaping or your infrastructure improvements, site improvements, to retain rain or snowfall and get it back into the ground rather than have it flow through the streets and end up back in the river.
And there's two benefits there. One is the recharge locally, but also it enhances water quality. Because if you pick up the streets and try to run it right to the river, it has an impact on the river. So groundwater does a nice job of infiltrating and cleaning it up. So yes, we are moving forward. Brenda Hunt in our office is working with your staff, and hopefully we'll have something to you in the next couple months that you can consider.
Any other questions of Ed? I have just a couple, Ed.
Sure.
What's the effect, if any, of climate change on our groundwater basins?
That is something that we are looking at. There was a big study done by the USGS. They completed, it was a 4-year study looking at possible impacts. There may be some reduction on infiltration, maybe not, we just don't know. Part of the ones like in Carson Valley, it's mostly coming from the river, and so as long as there's agriculture there, that recharge is going to be in good shape. What's interesting is the impact on the Truckee could have a bigger impact to us, and when I talk about us, it's the Churchill County area, and that's the impact to Lake Tahoe. And I had never thought about this, but if you look at Lake Tahoe, it stores top 6 feet, over 700,000 acre feet of water, which is twice what we get an annual flow on the Carson. So it was always a great one. But as one person pointed out, it's the worst reservoir in the world. Because typically when you build a reservoir, as it gets lower, it cuts in like this. The problem with Lake Tahoe, it goes down like this. So once you get past the 6 feet, you can't get the water out of there anymore, but the evaporation still occurs. And the biggest use on Lake Tahoe is evaporation. Over 400,000 acre feet a year is evaporated off Lake Tahoe. With climate change, warmer climate, less precip, the impacts on the Truckee are going to be significant. So that may have an impact on how much water gets into the Newlands project, to the Truckee Canal, and to the Fallon area, which then could cause problems up and down this watershed for, again, as we try to balance those needs. So we are connected at the ankle on the Truckee, and that's something we have to be aware of. The other concern is, like you see, the reduction of flows in the upper watershed. I do believe it's probably tied to climate change. And so we are seeing a reduction in flows in the river, and that's that balancing act we're going to have to look at in working with the community. Again, if you're Churchill County at the bottom, you're worried about if everyone starts taking the water before it gets there, and you're no longer able to get your resources, and you can't get it from the Truckee. So that's a communication that we are trying to work with everyone in the watershed to balance those needs. So climate change is something we're looking at. There's no definitive answer. And I've told other people that you might as well plan. If you don't have it, it doesn't have an impact, it's not a problem. But if you didn't plan for it, shame on you, because it could be an impact significant in the future. So we are working with that.
Okay. Another question on domestic wells. Are domestic wells, are they metered in our area?
No.
Does state law require metering domestic wells?
They do not. A domestic well is entitled to 2 acre feet per unit per year. The way the state engineer records how much water is being used is they assume about an acre foot per dwelling unit. So all those numbers I showed you on that are assumptions, and that's a pretty good assumption about how much water is being used, give or take how much is out there. Maybe in Silver Springs it might be less because I don't see a lot of big lands irrigated around Silver Springs area. But it gives an indication. But people have to realize you don't have to have a water right for a domestic well, but domestic wells do use water. And it's important you can calculate in those overall because we do have a lot of domestic wells up and down this watershed.
Or do we have any joint ownership wells, joint use wells, domestic wells? In other words, where 2 or 3 families will get together and use one well? Happens a lot of time in Las Vegas.
There are some in Vegas, I've heard, and other places. Most of the time, health departments do not like that because you don't know where the water's going from. That's probably more your staff would have a better answer than I would.
Okay.
Mayor, they do have those wells, those types of wells in Silver City.
It's Silver City?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the issue of paper versus wet, it's not particular, and I think you've mentioned it's not particular to this area we're in right now. I mean, I think it's all over the state. And, you know, my sense is, listen to the water wars last session. It's got to, you know, when you go and try and rectify paper water versus wet water, there's a lot of angst that goes along with that. So anyway, you know, it's something I think we have to address in the state. You know, according to your comments here today, you know, we're doing all right here, but I think there are other basins in Nevada where, you know, if we don't resolve that issue between what you have on paper and what you can draw out of the ground, we're running down without, we're kind of running blind in the state. So anyway.
I would agree on that. I would say that originally in this workshop, I was hoping the state engineer would take the lead on it. But they said, well, you guys have the structure in the Carson. Why don't you guys take the lead first, and we'll see how beat up you guys get, and then we can move forward. So
That's a pretty good idea, actually.
yeah, so
You know, you're the canary in the cage or whatever it's called.
see how it goes.
You see how it goes. Well, I think, you know, I'm glad to hear that, you know, that we have good water management in this area here. And I think, you know, that's due to a lot of, you know, our respective boards and things. And Ed, I can't be more pleased for you for getting that award. It's a good award. It's nice for a Carson City guy to get that. You know, I'll never forget when I think I'd known you before, but I took that tour on the Carson River, and we were doing kayaks.
Yes.
You remember doing it 360?
Oh, yeah.
I tried that, and it wasn't too easy on my head. So, anyway, anything else for Mr. James?
Ed, where is that picture? And I'm assuming it was one of our drone shots.
No, actually, this was taken by Juan Guzman, took this. And
Oh,
it's
really?
actually in the valley, and it was taken by him. This is in the Carson Valley, or when you go down.
Carson Valley?
I'm sorry, this is
Brunswick.
Canyon.
Yeah,
Canyon.
Brunswick.
Brunswick
Yeah.
Canyon area. And he took that, and it's a gorgeous picture.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
thank you. We don't need a motion here, but thanks, Ed, for giving us the update. It's always very fascinating and interesting. Brings back the old, what is it, Mark Twain statement? Everybody knows that one, right? Okay, all right. You know, I was thinking also that for elected leaders, not necessarily for us here at the local one, but there might be a requirement that they all have a chance to read Cadillac Desert before they get on some of those committees. Okay, let's take up item 21. This is discussion and presentation of the 2019 Carson City Downtown Parking Analysis. Okay? See you later, Ed.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Board.
Lucia, good morning. How are you?
Lucia Maloney, Transportation
How's everything in the
Manager.
transportation world?
Oh, living the dream, sir. No, everything's going well. Thanks for having us here today. While Lee pulls up the PowerPoint, I'll just introduce this item and kick it off. We periodically monitor parking downtown, both before and after the downtown project. We get comments from folks downtown sometimes that it's hard to find parking. We have a 2-hour parking policy in certain blocks of downtown, and the question comes up, is this working? Is there too much 2-hour parking? Is it too regulated? Is it not regulated enough? And so last year, we conducted a downtown parking study. RTC funded this effort, but really the heavy lifting was done by Lee's group to both designate the zones, and then it was a joint effort and a partnership to come up with the scope. So this item went to RTC last week, and we got a little bit of feedback, and we wanted to bring it to you as well to hear about the findings and the recommendations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Very good. Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you, Lucia. Lee Plemmel, Community Development. And yeah, that's nice of Lucia to say I have some expertise in this. I've just been around longer maybe and have more. I was here when they did this last time in 2007, a parking analysis. But I'm happy to give a brief presentation. And Lucia, the partnership is, we have the parking enforcement, redevelopment issues through community development. Public Works is in charge of the parking regulations, loading zones, where 2-hour parking goes, and those types of things. Lucia's also the administrative hearings officer for parking tickets, so she gets to deal with that all the time and grant different parking permits. So they're very familiar with the parking situation, and we work together to figure out what's needed. And this study kind of helps with that on an individual scale of where parking's needed. So to get into this, a short presentation, and to not bury the lead, the conclusion is that there's parking available in the downtown area, even within these sub-areas at any given time. And that's as long as you're willing to, might have to walk a block or two to find that parking at different times. And this gets into kind of that detail as to where the hot spots are, and it shows where the hot spots are. So let me tell you what this parking study included, and therefore what it doesn't include. So within this area, the boundary of the parking study was from William Street in the north to Fifth Street in the south, and excluding the state properties from Nevada Street over to the east to Roop Street, and you kind of see it on the group there. Furthermore, there's data broken down by 3 different sub-areas, north, central, and south, and obviously those sub-areas have different impacts based on what's going on. The south area being closest to the legislature building, obviously, and other things. So there are different impacts to these different areas. It includes all on-street parking, which is public parking. It includes all public parking lots, of which there are a couple identified on there. And we also had them count private lots that are open to the public, which are basically the Adams Foundation lots that could be developed in the future, but they are made available to the public currently and to business employees. So they're included in the inventory, but also broken out separately. And the counts were conducted in May. One count was conducted in May of 2019, so we got a count while the legislature was in session to see what impacts that has on our business parking in the downtown area. But the majority of the counts were then in September when the legislature was not in session. There's a total of about 1,400 parking spaces that are in these categories of public and then the private lots available to the public.
Wait a second, the 1,400 includes the private lots?
It includes the public lots, the private lots that we counted. It includes only the private lots that are available to the public. It is not all parking spaces in the downtown area. It doesn't include private parking lots, like for Bikesmith, for example, that has their own parking lot there. It doesn't include those. In the total area, there's 316 spots that have a 2-hour time limit, and that's about 22% of all the parking spaces in there. And again, that's the purpose of that type of time limit, is so that there's a turnover, they're not occupied all day, there's some turnover so that they're available to customers of businesses coming into the downtown or coming downtown for lunch or whatever that may be.
While we're on that 2-hour thing, I think we've all of us up here have received, over the years, questions about the street and behind the city hall being, you can park there all day. Some people say that should be a 2-hour. Anybody to take a look at that?
Do you want to talk about that now? Go ahead.
If it's coming later, that's fine. I need to cover that. I want to hear what the
Okay, we'll make
answer to
sure,
that is.
we'll make sure we
Very
hit
good.
that. Thank you. I actually pulled this from an old presentation I gave just kind of for comparison. You know, we showed maps of these areas, but what is kind of, and how many blocks it is and the distance. So this is, the shaded area there is the Walmart property. You know, the light shade with the dark orange being the building, light orange being the parking area and the property in general. So some context when we talk about how far you're going, if you got to go 1 block around the corner to find available parking or 2 blocks, kind of relative to what it is like walking across the Walmart parking lot and through the building. I know it's a totally different situation and different things, but just to add some size context, we actually have relatively small blocks in Carson City, in downtown, relative to other places, just because of the age of when they were created. So, getting right into the conclusions, this is a graph of parking during different times of the day, from 8 a.m. on the far left to 5 p.m. on the far right. The left graph is during the legislature. The right graph is not during the legislature. The first, as you go from bottom, and let's see, going the blue lower half of the bars is on-street parking, and then the green part are those using parking lots. And then you go going up, the first line there, the first blue line is the almost 11,000 spots that are strictly on public property. And then the total capacity, which includes the private lots that are county, is the upper black line there of about, a little over 1,400 parking spaces in total. So again, and this is an average during those times, and obviously spread out through the whole area. As we'll get into, there's some hot spots where they are full at any given time, but overall there's certainly capacity in the availability of parking. And so getting into the detail map, again, on the left is during the legislature, on the right's not during the legislature. And not surprisingly, I mean, I think you kind of, if you've been downtown, you know where the hotspots are, particularly during the legislature in the south there, with the red indicating 100% capacity or above if they found actually more cars apparently illegally parked somehow, or maybe in a loading zone or whatever that may be. But I think as you look at that, you see that there are sections that are at capacity. And then within, around the corner, a block or two, there's some spaces available. Lucia, is this a good point at which to talk about how Plaza Street? I only have, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 more slides, but the area that the mayor asked about, we have Carson Street right here. City Hall is here, with the Capitol building here, and it's this part here that's full, that's red, which is full during the day, and is currently, there's not designated for 2-hour parking, and it's on the east side of City Hall. And then there's these sections here that are 2-hour parking, and typically have spaces available during the day.
Maybe you can also address why it's red, because it isn't, that's one of the questions I had about that area, because it isn't signed for 2-hour parking, so how could there be illegal parking?
No, the red indicates it's full.
Oh,
It's 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, the red indicates that, on all of these, indicates that there's full, that at the peak time,
Okay.
there are no spaces.
Because there were some on the graph that were above capacity, which obviously would
Yeah, on the actual counts.
Yes.
Right.
So what the map shows is whether it's a legislative session in May of 2019 or not, as you know, and you've been around there, it's full all the time, pretty much is what the study found. We did, the consultant came back for a third round and looked at, in these hotspot areas, they did a turnover analysis where they recorded the last couple digits of license plates to understand how long the vehicles were there, to give us an understanding of, is this 2-hour parking effective? You know, does this make sense? And by and large, they said, yeah, this 2-hour policy makes sense, and it's helping turn over vehicles. And, you know, the idea of having this policy to get that business access and get that turnover is effective. So the consultant didn't come out with a recommendation to necessarily change this particular block, nor really any areas of downtown. The recommendation was, by and large, to keep it the same. That said, you know, changing to a 2-hour parking in this location is something that this body could certainly consider.
And I think so as I had mentioned, looking at, there are individual street segments like this, because it's not 2-hour parking and because it's right next to a high employment center, it gets used. The cars park there and they leave them there all day with a little bit of turnover, but the next person comes in without worry about coming back 2 hours later. So I think you would consider making that 2-hour if there weren't parking spaces available in the vicinity for businesses. And I think in this case, even during the legislature is when it's hard. And I think if you come at lunch, you find that sometimes there's not a parking space on Proctor Street, for example, or around the corner. But I think what it shows is that, again, within one block, there's always parking available. And I need to talk to Steve Neighbors, actually, and Adams Foundation about this, some conflicting signment. There's a public parking sign on this parking lot right here, but also some no trespassing signs. So I think that needs to be cleaned up. But clearly, there's parking available within the area. So, and I don't think you want to go too far of too much 2-hour parking, because employees do work in the area and need a place to park. And then they're just, what actually happens in some of the downtown, they just go move their car every 2 hours. They're using the parking spaces on the street where the businesses do, but they're just setting their clocks every 2 hours and going and moving their cars around. So you do need to have enough unrestricted parking spaces to accommodate the employees.
Are there any of our 2-hour areas limited by time? In other words, can you do, take on, what's the name of the street behind our city hall there? Proctor? Plaza. If you take Plaza and say, you know, you could park here 8 to 5, but between 11 and 1, it's 2-hour parking only. Does that work or doesn't work?
I think from a restriction standpoint, you could sign it that way. I think, you know, part of it is consistency. You know, we find if signs aren't consistent, and I point to Lucia because then they go talk to her and said, I didn't know because this. So consistency of sign for enforcement is always good, so that they know when they're in an area, it's during this time and it's everywhere. If you have different regulations on different street segments, people tend to not pay attention to that, but it could be done.
Okay, thank you. Brad?
It's an interesting idea, Bob, but it wouldn't work, because if the restricted time is 11 to 1, that's only 2 hours, so nobody would have to move their car. Ever.
All right. That's just my last slide with some final conclusions for discussion here. As noted in there, you saw it on the graph, but the maximum utilization rate currently is about 57% in the total area during the legislature and 51% at other times. So again, but then in the second bullet there, you see kind of it's different in other areas, with, of course, the southern area being the high utilization area during the legislature because it's in proximity to there. People are going in and out of there. And interestingly, in the northern area, there's not as much of the restaurants and things, and it's more auto-oriented. There's still more uses there that have their own parking lot, so it's low there. And then you have the central area, kind of that between Musser and Robinson, that pretty interesting. It's actually was pretty consistent at rates both during the session and not, but that's our area where more of the restaurants are and things like that, where it's about 60% all the time utilization, and there's available parking in the vicinity. So I'll just leave it at that. You have the detailed report in the packet, obviously, and we're happy to answer any other questions.
Were there any comments in the study that talked about the parking lot that's west side of Curry Street that's owned by, who is that? The church, Presbyterian Church?
That was included. Yeah, that's part of because it ties into the Adams Foundation private parking lot, and it goes right into there. So it is included in the counts, and so there's counts.
It's included in the counts for public parking?
Yeah, because it is available for public parking per an agreement with them and they get to they have it for church and things, but it's available during the week for public parking.
Have we received complaints from restaurants on the east side of Carson Street in our area, where City Hall is, about lack of parking?
I've gotten questions about parking on the west side of Carson Street, but east side, it seems like there's more availability and folks tend to park in those nugget parking lots when there's challenges on street. So I've gotten less complaints about them on the east side.
One last question, maybe this is for you, Lucia. Do we have sufficient signage, parking signage?
I think so. We've gotten, as Lee said, I serve as a parking hearings officer, and, when folks feel that they've received a parking ticket and they really didn't know, or they didn't see a sign, they tend to contest those tickets. And so that's a really good mechanism for us to get that feedback and better understand, when folks don't know. I haven't gotten one of those complaints in the last, I would say, year.
Okay, thank you. All right, go.
I think the kind of parking sign he was talking about is where to park, directional signage, not enforcement signage. I think that's how I took that.
Oh, my apologies. I haven't gotten any complaints ever about navigating, wayfinding signage to parking lots. But I will keep my eyes open or ears open for those.
And it's definitely something that was considered when we were doing signage for the downtown. But I think it's also something we continue to get feedback on and look at where it's needed.
It's also a recommendation in the traffic study.
I have a few. I don't know if you want me to
You got
go,
it.
or Brad, or Lori, or
Anybody else for Lee? John? Then we're going to go to Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Lee. I love it when somebody says, I'm not going to bury the lead, and you did a good job. Now, to paragraph 9 in the story. I'm concerned, and I know that the report does get into some of this, about enforcement. It's probably more an impression than anything else. But there are business owners that have talked to me about the fact that staff at other businesses come down, park all day, or, as you said, move their car every 2 hours if it's 2 hours. Do we enforce the 2 hours enough, or in your opinion?
So we do have a enforcement officer that does nothing but downtown parking enforcement during the week, through the core hours and through lunch in particular. We make sure we hit those times. It's difficult at times when people are moving. They're not violating the 2-hour parking by moving there, at least as it currently stands, to be able to enforce a ticket to when they move their car and go to another parking space, even though they're effectively still taking up a parking space on that block. But, and it's, Jim does a good job going in and talking to the businesses about it and talking to people, hey, I know, see what you're doing, can we find another solution? And, or there's residents downtown that, have certain issues, and we talk to them when we can. If he catches people parking on the sidewalk, that's, that's the issue that gets addressed right away. So we do what we can. I mean, it is a balance between writing a whole bunch of tickets and making a lot of customers mad versus we tend to try to talk and resolve the situation before it gets to a parking ticket, because he's down there every day.
Thank you. As I said, I think it maybe is more a matter of perception than reality, but, some people have this in their minds. And I would say the same thing about I'm glad you put that Walmart thing up there, because sometimes I think the perception is, I'm going to go to Walmart and then they get down there and they have to park a ways away, but they can see the building. They come downtown, oh, I got to park 2 blocks away and I can't see the building and blah, blah, blah. And it's really no difference, but people think that there's a difference. So thanks for the report. It's a good one.
Okay. Anything more? Lucia? Okay. Oh, Chief, sorry.
Thanks. The other thing that I find interesting that you didn't include on here is that, because it wasn't in the parameters, but there's a huge legislative lot south of Fifth Street that is also public parking that's available, that wasn't even included in this inventory, that really, in non-legislative years, is a great resource for parking and can, in fact, be used even during legislative years, although it's almost always full. But I don't know how many spaces are in there. I'd have to guess a couple hundred anyway. So that's another great source that isn't that far from anything either. And I know one of the problems behind City Hall is it's mostly, I think for the most part, state workers, either in the Blasdale building or the Capitol building. And this is a state issue, but it would be nice if they'd open up the legislative parking lot, which I don't think they do for state employees on non-legislative years. And I don't think they do that. That we have nothing to do with that. It would just be nice. Relative to the mayor's comment and the signage, I think it would just be a good idea, and as the study recommended, to just take a look at that and make sure we've got signage as though you're not a local, so that you can see where signage is. And perhaps as a tag on to John's question, maybe with us now knowing where the high problem areas are in terms of violating parking, that's where our limited enforcement resources can be focused on. Now that we have a place for them to go to know where this is where it's constantly being violated. And finally, and I know Supervisor Budkowski's brought this up in other settings, I find it very difficult when I'm parking on the concrete Carson Street spots. The paint, and I understand why, because we're keeping it clean, and it would be great if we could find a way to have higher visibility, because I think part of the problem is that there is enough space for 3 cars if you have 3 small cars. But our point is we didn't want that, right? Because we didn't want to impede traffic. We wanted people to be able to pull into a spot, not have to jockey around and take 5 minutes. And I think that's it's one of the enforcement areas that was noted in here. I don't know what the answer is, but maybe, between Public Works and mostly Public Works can figure out if there's some sort of high visibility way to put some paint or something down that doesn't, go away in 3 months, without being overly expensive. So I think it would help, because I don't think people are violating it intentionally. I think, between the lack of visibility and the fact that there feels like you can fit 3 cars in there, they're just doing it.
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that from my opinion of that from the start. I think I think from the very start of the Carson Street thing, we wanted to make sure we had parking on Carson Street. I think that was a really important part of the project. Without that, it gives kind of a sense of separation of pedestrians and the traffic. It gives a sense that there's something going on when there's cars parked there. We frankly wanted the whole block to have parking on it, but the evolution of it was a lot of people coming saying people don't know how to parallel park. It would be a disastrous to traffic downtown. My personal opinion is that the photos show there, and then the evolution was, okay, well, yeah, let's get 2 spots so we have at least something on there, and people still can't park, but let's make them big enough so people don't have a problem parallel parking and they can get in and out of them. I don't think three cars parking in those has been a traffic problem. I think the photos show there's room for 3 cars, a truck, couple smaller cars are parking there, no problem, space between them. I would suggest that marking, I would suggest it's not a problem that needs to be solved, is what I'm saying.
I guess what I'm saying is that, if you think we can fit 3, then let's mark them for 3. I guess that's all I'm saying. And maybe it isn't a problem, but
I mean, we don't mark, I guess what I'm saying, we don't mark other street frontages to specify where they have to park. They park where there's room to park, depending on your car size and.
I'd
when
be
there's
okay with
no-
that, then let's take the markings away completely. I'd be fine with that. I just think it's confusing to have the marks there, and when people maybe get out of their car, they don't see it. So if we think we can fit 3, let's take the marks away, and we'll fit, maybe it's 1 big truck. And because, Brad's driving his semi that day, and he wants to, park in front. I'm okay with that. I wouldn't have an issue with that. And if we can fit, 7 motorcycles in there, I don't have any issue with that. But I just think the marking is confusing to people, and that's my comment.
And it's not, to your point, it's a little bit there, but wearing off, so it's not really
Right.
visible right now.
So I say, let's either have it there or let's not have it there. That's all. Yeah, the numbers don't matter to me. If we can fit more, I'm all for more.
Well,
May I
guess-
do, oh, go ahead, Brad.
I guess when Dodge makes an 800 horsepower semi, I'll buy one.
Well, don't you pretty much have a semi engine in that car of yours?
Yeah, pretty much. A couple of questions. First, the traffic study didn't look at the 20-minute parking areas. I think if I remember right, there's maybe 2 of them.
They were included in the study and inventoried.
Yeah, but it didn't break them out separately to look at the impacts. And I don't know that we, either through RTC or at the Board of Supervisors level, have ever really had a open discussion about the impacts of 20-minute parking. It's kind of a Pandora's box. I think if we're open to 20-minute parking, every business in town along Carson Street is going to want 20-minute parking, and it's going to be their parking space. So I don't know that I would be real happy about having that conversation, but because this traffic study didn't break out the 20-minute parking spots, what is your thought on whether we should or shouldn't have more or less 20-minute parking spots? I get a lot of complaints, frankly, about the Carson Pond 20-minute parking spot, a lot.
Me too.
Either one of you. Anyone in the room? Anyone?
I think
Anyone? Ferris? Anyone?
I will say I've gotten requests for an additional 20-minute parking spot on the block to the south of the pond store. Why is there one on that block and not one on the southernmost block directly across from City Hall? That's something Lee and I have discussed. We discussed it with the consultants, and really it depends on the land use and the uses of those businesses. That said, in light of this study, it's very clear that there is parking close by, and so we've gone back and forth on whether there really is a need, and in looking at parking policy in some of the bigger cities, it is a Pandora's box, and you start complicating the parking scheme, and then it extends out, and how far do you extend it, and how much staff resources do you invest? And so I think Lee and I are in agreement that our recommendation is keep it simple, as long as there's availability close by, that we're probably doing a good job of balancing those needs.
Yeah, I think staff so far, because that was initially promised with the original one that's been 20, those areas have been 20 minutes since the beginning. I think we're reluctant to just take it away without a bigger discussion, but also reluctant realizing we don't really want to expand it so that there's 20 minutes everywhere and it gets too convoluted. I think it's worth a discussion at some point of what they should be long-term. This doesn't solve the issue. But I think that's why we're where we are.
Supervisor Barrett, did you have your light on?
I
you
still
did.
have another
It's
question,
you.
Bob.
Okay, huh?
I still have another question.
Okay, go.
I've had several business owners downtown either email or call me to complain or catch me while I'm in their store to complain about the parking downtown. But I also have a business downtown. and have for the last 12 years. And in that 12-year period, because we frequent downtown almost every day, or at least until we couldn't eat in the restaurants anymore, we frequented downtown almost every day to contribute to our local restaurants. And in that 12-year period, I've never once had to park more than 2 blocks away, ever, in 12 years. So I think, at least in my opinion, that this traffic study is right on. We don't have a parking problem. What we have is, as John said, we have people in this town and business owners that would prefer that people could park right in front of their store. That, I don't believe, is possible, nor is it maybe healthy. So I don't know that I want to tweak the system that we have in place. It appears to be working, but I would like to hear from the other board members on whether they would like to have that conversation about the 20-minute parking.
My answer is yes, and I don't think that it's a good idea to have different standards for what amounts to the same thing. So I didn't like the 20-minute parking when it showed up in the first place, but I understand it was right from the get-go. I think it should go away.
I just thought we were going around. Sorry, Lori, go ahead.
So I don't mind having the discussion because I think I don't even understand why it was originally promised. I don't have the background or the knowledge to know whether, or was it 20-minute parking that he used to have somewhere? Because there wasn't a parking space on Main Street. So I'm still not connecting a dot as to how he had it to begin with, because there wasn't a parking place there. But what I'm concerned about now, and it'll be later on when we're discussing parking, is the new model of all of those restaurants that are on Main Street needing a 10-minute pickup and drop off. So I think we have a larger discussion, and I just want to be fair. And I don't know sometimes how we can do it, but why did we give one business owner not only the 20-minute, but a perception that it's his parking place? So I really deal with that as two different issues. It's not yours, but by making it the 20-minute parking place, there's a perceived ownership of that parking location also. And so I guess I do want the larger discussion of what our policy is.
I think your question on kind of the background of why it was as effectively being a loading zone for the types of businesses that were there. And it's, like I said, with the initial approval of the project and the discussions that were back and forth, it was just what was agreed to when the project was designed at one point. I mean, I think it is worth evaluating now, but it did have to do with it's basically a loading zone. And I would separate that permanent discussion from the temporary discussion we're going to have later for businesses needing to do more pickup and drop off now. But it's the concept is the same, that you need some spaces available. Is to try to have some spaces available for the quick pickup stuff.
Darren Schultz, for the record. I agree with what Lee said, and it came about as before there was more parking available in front of that business, and that business model works on quick in and out. So when we were doing the project, it really was basically a concession that was made to that business owner because of the loss of parking along the frontage there. And so it was given. It wasn't a formal process or anything like that, but that's how it came about. So I can tell you that my personal belief in terms of 20-minute parking is it's, the further we can get away from it, the better.
Anything else? Okay. Lucia, would you do, rather than take it up here, would you give either me or Stacy, or Supervisor Jomi a call? We've got complaints about traffic speeds going down King Street, not off the, we've heard about the ones coming off Kings Canyon. This is down near the schools, how we're going to stop, control speed, and are we going to do something with, expanding or do it so that there's not a break in the school zone. That's all. Just give us a call when you get it. You don't need to do it here.
Absolutely. Will do.
Thanks. Okay, all right. All right. Anything else of this panel?
Yeah, just wanted to weigh in on Supervisor Bonkowski's question. I too agree that, no, I don't think any major changes need to happen. I don't think we should have any more, and I also agree with what Lee said, that the discussion on the short-term parking relative to COVID is separate, and we can set that aside. But relative to 20 minutes, I don't know that, I don't know that we should allow it. Whether we continue to allow it for the existing one, I guess, is the question. But I don't think I'd consider expanding it. I don't think I'd consider expanding it. So that's to your point.
Yeah, go.
And you can correct me, Lucia or Lee, I think there's 2, possibly 3 areas that have 20-minute parking. I believe right in front of the Adams Hub, there's a 20-minute parking spot. There's the one in front of Carson Pond. And if I remember rightly, there may be one on Telegraph Street, right in front of Kimley Sushi for a loading zone.
I think that is 20 minutes, or loading zone right there.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so it isn't just the Carson Pond one. I mean, we'd be making a policy for all of those. And I guess, based on the comments here, we'd have to fold into that conversation the loading zone conversation. So is that going to be a separately striped area without a time limitation? Because those things are going to go hand in hand.
In my mind, the curb rental program within the municipal code is a little bit separate from the signage of the timed parking. But we'd be happy to have that discussion, whether it's appropriate here or at RTC. Appreciate any direction on that.
Anything else?
Probably RTC and then here would probably be appropriate.
Very good. Okay. We doing all right on South Carson Street?
Moving ahead, sir. We're still on schedule. We're looking to, the public and you can anticipate the full closure for the roundabout construction, probably the first week in August or the second week in August, getting started on that. That's expected in the contract to last a full 6 weeks, but there are opportunities potentially to shorten that duration, and staff are working with the contractor to get in and out of there as quickly as possible and to minimize impacts to those businesses.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, come back here at 11 o'clock, and then we'll reconvene the board. So we'll be in recess for about 10 minutes. Okay.
It's not 11. Oh,
I know, I did it a minute early.
okay.
I did it on purpose, you know,
To
to
make us see if we were
make
paying
sure that
attention.
everybody was on time here. Okay, we're going to bring the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order on item number 22. This is purchasing and contracts, 22 Alpha. Carol, you want to tell us where we are on this one?
Sure. This is for a construction contract award for 20300026. This is a Telegraph Street reconstruction project to Aspen developers for a not-to-exceed amount of $610,500.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Darren Schultz for the record again. Yeah, this is a project that's near and dear to a number of people's heart. It's very much a mess in that area, and it's been on our radar for a long time. It's complicated in terms of the funding. A lot of funding, different sources are involved, but in the end, we have a very complete project, and when we're done, this whole thing will be improved, not just the surface, but all the underground as well. Our utilities in that area are very old and have seen better days. And we're also going to take the theme of Carson Street and wrap it around the corner through this block, so the sidewalks and the way the trash cans and benches and stuff, it'll all blend in. The foundation just to the east there, they recently resurfaced their parking lots as well as the roads in that area. So this will tie into that, and it's we'll get rid of some of those potholes that just keep coming and coming and coming. So
Very good.
any questions?
Supervisor, anybody? Supervisor Pankowski.
Darren, on the alternate bid line, item 53 was included because the engineer's estimate was considerably higher for the base bid, but alternate line item 54 was not. But even if that was included, it would still be less than the engineer's estimate for the base bid. Can you let us know why that wasn't included? And do we have extra benches still in inventory that can be put out there? Is that why?
Yeah, the reason we didn't include it is because although we had money to do it as part of the project, that bid item, that bid cost was just too high. And so we did some background work, and we can procure the benches and install them for half that price, and that's what we're going to do.
Great, that's good news. And I've gotten some calls, this is just a side note, I've gotten some calls from downtown business owners complaining because when we originally looked at the design for the benches downtown, they were supposed to have the center arm to keep homeless people from sleeping on them. And the benches that we installed do not have those. And so there's some businesses downtown with the additional homeless that we've seen this year that are having a problem with that. I don't know if when you're looking at procuring the benches, if maybe we can pick up 3 or 4 of the benches that have the center arm and trade them out, maybe take some of the benches that don't have the arms in the middle from those locations where they're problematic, move it over to Telegraph Street, and then install the ones that do have the arms in the places where it's a problem?
Okay, I will. I'll go back to my notes, Supervisor. My recollection is we did have that conversation. There's no doubt about that conversation. But I thought I remember that the decision was made here that we would not have those arms in the middle, that it was determined we wanted them opened. But I can go back and check that.
Actually, didn't we reduce to accommodate to the 4 foot instead of the 6 foot?
Or the shorter
That we
benches.
went to the shorter bench instead of the stuff so that anyway, we went to the 4 footers, right?
But are we having a
Because we did discuss that we
problem?
wanted benches that were, yes,
Okay.
that we could
Okay.
trade.
That if we could address that,
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, very good. All right, will do.
Anything else? Supervisor Giomi?
Yeah, just a quick question. When do you think it'll start? When do you think it'll be done? Project timeline?
It's pretty quick, pretty condensed. They have to be done by Nevada Day. So they're gonna wanna get in there and get rolling pretty quick. We did allow them to shut down that little block and do the work because of all the underground. So it's gonna go really pretty quick. So I would anticipate them, starting in there probably early August is when we'll get going. We haven't met with the contractor until after this meeting, but that's what I would guess would be early August and then be out of there.
Anything else? When people say, how old is your sewer system? I remember it was Dan Rotter told me, there's a sewer line that goes east and west right under the south side of the Nugget building itself. It's right under the building.
That's correct.
How'd we ever let that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't do that now, I'll tell you that.
We don't do it now. Good
That's right.
job.
That's
All
right.
right. Anything else? All right, motion's in order.
I move to award the contract as presented.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Thank both of you. Let's take up item 22, Bravo. This is use of Marathon temporary staffing group. Oh, this is actually a joiner contract. Tell us where it is, and I better shut up, Carol.
Stop.
All right.
No, this is just for the annual request for temporary staffing. This is citywide. The request this year is for $1 million, which is $717,946 with a $282,054 contingency for the fiscal year, and that's for kind of unexpected or grants that are awarded where staffing will be needed. This year in specifically is going to be COVID-related expenses.
Okay. All right. Any questions on this issue? Do we have? Okay, you're the hitter then. All right. Any questions about Marathon or the joiner contract we've done for temporary staffing? All right, I don't hear any. We could do a motion then if you're comfortable doing that. Motion's in order.
I'll do
Go
it.
ahead.
I move to approve the joinder contracts as presented.
There's a motion and a second, a couple seconds on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. Let's take up 22, Charlie now. This is, you tell us about it, Carol. Go ahead.
So this is a kind of a two-part because it involves purchasing the equipment and software and then also a professional service contract with Converge One for city phone systems, and they're bringing in some audio-visual. I told them to bring rotary phones back in.
Good morning.
There we go. Good morning, Mayor-elect, Supervisors. So I've got a presentation here. And we're talking about replacing the city voice over IP phone system. So just so that you can get an idea of what we're talking about here, we have 3 different phones for display. We have the very old phones. We have roughly 325 or so of those deployed in the city right now. This is our current vendor, current phone. We've been replacing those as we go. And this is the proposal for the new phone. And these are the phones that have the most wide deployment, the highest numbers, roughly 450 or so of these phones. There are other models that have more or fewer features, but those are the most widely deployed phones. So I thought I would go through the presentation real quick, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
All right. So what are we proposing to do? Again, this will replace our entire city voice over IP phone system. Voice over IP is a widely used technology in place of the old technology, rides over the network essentially. Just like any other WebEx audio or GoToMeeting audio, similar technology, but this is a technology that will run in-house. So it includes all of the core phone system hardware, servers, et cetera, software that's needed, all the handsets, any conference phones, and all of the ATA devices which provide fax lines and plain telephone service for things like alarms or those types of lines. So currently we have a lot of devices out in the field. This will consolidate them into more manageable devices that will provide that service.
James, before you move on.
Yes.
So I believe what I heard you say is that on our right, your left, the phone handset.
Yes.
That there's about 450 of those deployed throughout the city. But that's also the phone handset that the new system would include? But this says we're replacing all handsets. So to me, that means we're replacing that handset with that handset, which seems redundant.
Let me clarify that. So our current system uses these two models. These two models are not compatible with what we're proposing for the new system. This one is. So we went through an exercise and basically considered upgrading our current system and switching vendors. In order to upgrade our system, we would only need to replace this model of phone. These could stick with the current system and be upgraded if we went down that route. The route that we're proposing is to replace every phone, which is about 650 total, including the lower models, the higher models, the middle models, this being the middle model, with new phones. So everybody in the city would get a new handset. So those were the options. Does that answer your question?
No, because I believe one of your comments was that the medium one, the one on my right, your left, that there's already 450 of those deployed throughout the city. Is that not the case? Is it the middle one?
Tyler Saylor, Systems Administrator for the record. So these phones, this style and model, these we have about half split between in the city.
Okay.
These we bought as we deployed the current system and as it was upgraded.
So we don't have any of the third model currently deployed?
Correct. So
Okay, that answers my
This model would
question.
become what was on most desks.
Correct. So here's the numbers that we actually have in the field. The model on your left, I'll talk to your left since that's your perspective. We have 328 of those. The model in the middle is the remainder of the 650 that we currently have deployed. So the model to your left, some of those are 15 years old and they're failing. The hook switches don't work or lots of problems with them. They also are slow. We provide the connectivity from the desktop PCs or laptop PCs with a docking station through the phone so that we don't have to have two cables to every office. So the phone on the far left is 100 megabits, and these two phones are 10 times that speed, so gigabit speed. So one of the issues is that as we use more services going forward, the older phones don't provide enough speed to the PC themselves. So we did in the staff brief in the background, I mentioned that we did a 5-year cost of ownership for different scenarios. So, we're in an age now where cloud computing and services is a topic that we want to consider. It's like buying electricity. Do you want to, generate your own electricity, or do you want to buy it? Turns out that was a very expensive option, so we didn't go down that route at all. It was about $600,000 or more for that option. We considered upgrading our current system, which means we need to buy new hardware, upgrade our software licenses, and buy phones to replace the model on your left. So that would have been 328 phones. Turns out it's cheaper to go with a new vendor, Fortinet, even though we'd have to replace all 650 phones. And that route will save just under $90,000 over 5 years, even considering that fact. And in addition, when we buy new handsets, they will be 20 to 50% less, depending on the model, than our current vendor. So any ones that we add for new staff, that'll be additional savings above and beyond that. So to give you a little bit of background on this, there's obviously some risk associated with switching vendors. We wanted to minimize that risk. So we reached out to the vendor, Fortinet, and they provided us with a trial that started in February. No cost to the city. They provided the software, the handsets, and we've been utilizing those in IT for the past 5 months or so. In addition, we've gotten feedback from Human Resources. The courts has one that they've been using, and we deployed these to the COVID call center for their use. So we've spent quite a bit of time trialing the new technology to reduce the risk as much as possible in switching to a new vendor. We can't eliminate all the risk, but we can certainly try it, find the issues, and evaluate how well the vendor supports us, which we've done. All told, over the past 5 months, we've had about 18,000 calls, roughly, that we've taken over the trial system. That amounts to about 800,000 minutes? Oh, no, sorry, 800 hours, yeah. So our confidence level going into this is very high. And in addition, the new system offers us some things that the old system doesn't, or it was very expensive to add that on. Things such as informational reports on calls, length of calls, number of calls, who made the calls, things like that, so that we can get a gauge on how many minutes each person or each department is using. We also have the ability to do a call center style dial-in line. So, for example, when you call into a support center for some product and they have you on hold, they can tell you what place you are in line. They can tell you approximately how many minutes you'll be on hold, things like that we don't have with our current system. We also get the ability to record phone calls. So if we have a line that we want to record, that's an option that we can do on the lines. And finally, the last point I'd like to make before asking if you have any questions is this phone system proposal. The phone system by Fortinet is more right-sized for what we have. Our current phone system, if you are a company of 10,000 people, for example, 10,000 phones, it's a great phone system. You need very specialized people to support that phone system. And if we were to go out and hire somebody for that, that is a skill that requires a very specialized skill set and lots of training. Whereas the Fortinet phone system has fewer bells and whistles, or knobs and levers, so to speak. But you can support it with a more generalized IT staff. So with that,
Any other questions?
take any questions?
Mr. Underwood? Fred, go.
Yeah, if I remember right, in your staff report, you also talked about customer service and that you had noted during the trial period, I believe it was 22 issues, bugs in the system that they corrected immediately with patches. So can you kind of go through the customer service portion of this and what your thoughts are on that and how fast, how quickly they can get code revision to us?
How quickly we can get what?
Code revision?
Oh, okay, absolutely. Do you want to go ahead and talk to that point, Tyler? Tyler worked with them most of all on that aspect of it. And by the way, I don't know if I stated my name, James Underwood, for the record.
We got you.
So Supervisor Bonkowski, they were great. I just have to say, I'm sorry to say I like a vendor so much, but they do it on a quarterly basis. And if we are able to provide them good enough diagnostic data of here's what happened and here were the conditions, here's how to replicate it, they made their quarterly review for code to make it into a release that we could apply to our system every time.
That's great to hear, and I commend everybody in IT that worked on this project. This is the kind of research and data that I'd like to see to help me make a decision up here. It concerns me a little bit that what I hear you saying is that we bought the Cadillac system last time, and it's way more than we need, which meant that we spent money that we didn't need to spend on it. So I truly appreciate the research and time that you've spent on this to make sure that it's right-sized and that we're buying what we need and, in fact, potentially getting a better vendor and better product all at the same time.
With the question, Supervisor Joby.
Yeah, I'd like to ditto what Brad said. I appreciate your approach, and I think it's spot on. As Brad said, it's difficult sometimes for us to read a 40-page document and get the full background. So it's really good to get the professionals telling us what you did to get to your decision. The current system has some features that when I was an employee of the city, I found helpful, and I just want to make sure that they continue. Just so like phone-to-phone paging and messaging. IT could send out a message to all the screens that said email system is down, or does it still have those capabilities with this new system?
Supervisor Giomi, we have trialed a new system to replace our current paging system. It's called, the old one is called Synapse. We moved to Informacast.
Okay.
And it is compatible with both systems.
I'm familiar with Informacast.
Perfect.
I've used it. Yeah, I'm familiar with it, so.
So it will actually bridge between the two systems
Perfect.
and work with the final system when we're on just one.
Great. And with this system, and this is more of a, this is probably a nerdy comment in the background, but one of the inherent problems with IP phone systems is moving phones and programming for 911 purposes. So I assume you guys have a system in place to address that, because it has been a problem before, both in the city and with other businesses in the community that use IP phones. And what I'm talking about is typically a phone is programmed with an address in it, and if someone moves that phone from that building, plugs it in at another building, it maintains its address from the former building, and if you call 911 with that, it doesn't know where you are. So this system addresses that, or you have processes that will address that adequately. Is that a fact?
I believe we have additional capabilities with this system that we did not have previously, and it fits well with the network architecture that we're designing, but I can turn it over to Tyler for more comment.
The current system doesn't have a good way for us to map where a phone is at to its physical location in the world so that we can tell dispatch, hey, someone's having a heart attack here or something's happening at the pool. One of the things we really like about the proposed new system is that it lets us assign a profile for 911 to a given phone so that not only can we send the right 911 address, we can comply with the new federal 911 regulations and notify people in the building at the front desks, hey, there was a 911 call here, so that they know that they need to help first responders when they come to the building.
Really good. Thank you. That's great to know. Thanks.
Supervisor Barrett?
Thank you very much. I want to echo what Brad and Stacy have said regarding your work on this. And I particularly like Tyler's comments about he hates to say something good about a vendor, but he has to in this case. I pretty much fall into that category in almost a half a century of watching government at various levels. I found that vendors promise it, the world, but, it turns out to be kind of like the perfume. It starts out good and then it stinks later. So it sounds to me like you have confidence that won't occur. I have a question to follow up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We do absolutely have the most confidence that we can have going into this at this point. Of course, we can't guarantee everything will be perfect, but I feel that we've done everything that we can to this point to minimize the risk of any issues and select the right solution. And we will definitely do everything we can to make the rollout a success.
Great. Perfection is a hard bar to get over, but I'm glad to hear you're working at that. The question I have is, you said that this system has the capability in each phone to record. Is that at a higher cost, or are we going to get that with every phone? Because in government, it's great to have a playback record of whatever.
Yep. I believe we get that with every license, correct?
We do get the capability to record with every phone in the system if it has a key that can be programmed to do that. The lower end phones just don't have a key for recording on them. One thing I will say, we're working on policies right now for recording of phone calls. The intent is to have that be a function for main and customer service centric lines at the discretion of the department, and also that we comply with the relevant legislation for making sure we prompt and say, hey, this line can be recorded before somebody, a citizen or a vendor or whoever it might be, can be recorded by the system.
And I believe you alluded to this, Tyler, but clarify if this is wrong. We can have phones opt in and out per phone call based on a button, correct?
It does allow us to give a customer, for example, calling the utility billing line, the chance to opt out of being recorded by choosing option 1 or option 2 while they're on the phone before they talk to a real person.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, sure.
Do they offer a soft phone option?
Yes, we actually included in the purchase a purchase of 100 soft phone licenses. The nice thing about the soft phone licenses with this company versus our previous company is that they run about $100 all told, and it's a perpetual license. There's no additional fee in terms of ongoing maintenance or anything. They just add that on for us. So anybody could use, and we actually have had, I did put this in the background information, we have had quite a few people using the soft phone to act like they're at their office essentially through the COVID work from home. They were able to fully function. And then I would also add, so we have the two systems coexisting right now. We can transfer calls back and forth between the old system and the new system. So we've also kind of reduced the exposure of the time frame that we're going to take to roll out the phones. Since there are a few little things that don't work between the two, but they're very minor.
Okay. Anybody else? Motion's in order. We're ready to do it. Supervisor Bunkowski.
I move to approve contract 203-00059 as presented.
There's a motion and a second. On a motion, discussion. Hearing and seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Let's take up item 23. Let me just kind of say what I think we're going to, for the schedule. We've got 2 items, we actually have 3 items left for the board meeting, technically for this morning. And then we're supposed to go to a 1 o'clock hearing on the health, with the health board. My sense is that if we go over 12 o'clock today, and I don't want to foreclose anybody from speaking or discussing items under our board. If we go past 12 o'clock, we're going to move the Board of Health until 1:15 or 1:30, and we'll just have somebody here, because I think it's important for us to go get something to eat. But on the other hand, we also want to make sure there's continuity and things, so let's see how that works, all right? All right. Jennifer? I've got the proclamation. Do you want to read it? You want me to read it? Pardon me?
You read it, Bob.
I'm going to read it then. I'm going to read
Giving her
it.
the proclamation.
That says Jennifer here. Jennifer, and also I'm going to read it. We're not going to get a picture taken today, all right? Tell your folks that, it's not because we don't like them. It's just because of other things going on. All right. It's a proud day for me to issue a proclamation for Parks, recognizing Parks and Recreation Month, July 2020. And I'd like to read that. I mean, I think one of the hallmarks that this city has that we sometimes don't promote a lot is our Parks and Rec, and we're doing pretty good on the trails. But I think, part of what makes, keeps the city going and keeps people having a good attitude about life are Parks and Rec. So I'm going to read this. It says, whereas Parks and Recreation are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Carson City, that's what I just said, and whereas Carson City's Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department's mission is to provide exceptional parks, open space, and diverse recreational opportunities to enhance the quality of life in Carson City while preserving our natural resources for future generations. And whereas Carson City's parks, trails, and open spaces have proven to be essential during the COVID-19 pandemic due to the public's unprecedented use of its outdoor activities, recreation areas. Carson City is proud to provide safe spaces for people to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas Carson City has this is interesting, Carson City has more parks per capita than the national average. The city's park system consists of over 8,000 acres, providing recreation opportunities that help build a healthy, active community, which aids in the prevention of chronic disease. Going to help here too, right? Okay. Provides therapeutic recreation services for individuals of all abilities and improves the mental and emotional health of its citizens. And whereas Carson City's natural areas are fundamental to environmental stewardship by improving air, and water quality, protecting groundwater, preventing flooding, and preserving the wildlife habitat. And whereas Carson City's park and recreation facilities enhance the community's economic vitality by increasing the property values while promoting tourism, the attraction and retention of business, and crime reduction. And whereas Carson City is honored to be a Tree City USA and the first Bee City USA in Nevada. Hooray, how's that? Whereas the United States House of Representatives and the National Park and Recreation Association have designated July as Parks and Recreation Month and called upon communities throughout the country to recognize the importance of parks and recreation. Now therefore, I, Robert Kroll, Mayor of Carson City, on behalf of all of us, the Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim July 2020 as Parks and Recreation Month in Carson City, and I urge all residents to spend time in their favorite parks and enjoy this beautiful region we call home. It's not often that you can walk out your back door and look at a beautiful view and go walk on that, or run on it, or bike on it. I think it was the old city manager, Nick Morano, who said, it's amazing because you can, you're in an urban environment, and a couple steps later, you're in a rural environment. We're fortunate to have that. Jennifer, pass on to all of our folks at Parks and Rec. Thanks for what they're doing. I know that, you got a lot of grass to cut in this town. I'm always amazed at that. And so, and I know there's, people sometimes get complained when the grass gets too high or the weeds get up. You do a good job managing all that stuff. And on top of that, you manage the gun range. Well done. Okay. So I'm going to put this up here for you. I'll get it. There you go. I'll get out of your way here while you pick that up. How's that? Okay. All right.
Oh, I just want to say something.
Sure, go.
So I did have lunch with my husband in the park the other day at Mills Park. It was absolutely lovely to see such a cross-section of the community all social distancing and eating lunch. It was kind of interesting for me to just sit and watch that, but I also had an opportunity to look at some of the work that's just been done. The pickleball group, I happened to just be there that day. I don't know how I got lucky at that, but anyway, so see the tennis court work and the pickleball work that, again, community members are doing to just have our parks thrive and survive even more. So just wanted to mention that since it's Park Month.
Good comment. And if you're up at Ash Canyon and you want to use a brand-new trail, the Mayor's Trail is up there. Go find it, walk it, or run it, or bike it. It's good. It's a wonderful trail. Okay. All right. Anything further under this item? Let's go to 23 Bravo. This is the Open Space Advisory Committee for its 2019 annual, wait a second. Yeah, annual report. Lindsay, how you doing? I'm doing well. All right. You brought the old man with you, too. Bruce? It's good to see you, man.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You've been around here a long time. I also told Bruce that, we're fortunate to have Bruce in this community. Good work, Bruce. And I want to put that on the record. Just good work. Okay, Lindsay.
So for the record, Lindsay Boyer, Open Space Manager. This is my first time coming before the board in this new capacity. I was promoted in May 2020, so.
Why don't you tell people what your background is, your degrees?
Sure. So I went to school at UNR, and I got my degree in wildlife ecology and conservation, and spent some time working in the nonprofit sector, and then came to the city as the natural resource specialist in 2017. And here I am as the open space manager, so.
Very good. Thanks, Lindsay. All right.
Yeah, so I'm joined today by Bruce Scott, the chair of Open Space Advisory Committee, as well as Alan Welch, who's our vice chair. And we are here today to present the 2019 annual report for the Open Space Program. So you have the report before you in your packet, and we'll certainly answer any questions that you guys may have specifically, but there's just a few items that I wanted to highlight. I think one of the biggest ones is that Open Space is a partner or a direct receiver of nearly 15 grants, which total $3 million in funds that we're able to leverage on top of the quality of life funding that we receive every year. So I think that's pretty exciting to highlight, and that's just within the last year. Some of those roll over, but a lot of that's just within the last year. Other things to highlight, in 2019, we completed the Prison Hill 5th Street Trailhead Improvement Project. So if you guys are driving around town, you may have seen the new picnic shelter and restroom facility that we put in there. It's looking really beautiful. We've made a lot of strides on the south end of Prison Hill, trying to manage the motorized area over there, working with the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council, or NOVAC. They've been a great partner in really trying to effectively and responsibly manage that area, so a lot of strides there. We were fortunate enough to acquire 20 acres along Highway 50 in 2019, so protected some viewshed and hillside there, so another exciting thing to note. And I also just wanted to highlight that, we work with so many volunteer groups and different agencies and community partners, and we're just so thankful for all the help that they provide to Open Space as well. So, with that, I'll have Bruce add anything that he'd like to add.
Thank you, Lindsay. Members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here, and I just wanted to say a couple things. I'm just here really for eye candy.
They might call you the potted plant, not eye candy.
Anyway, I wanted to thank the board for all of its help, not only recently, but over the years, and the support of Open Space. We're very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish with the help of the board and the support of the board. We always have a wrinkle or two, but very honestly, we have a really good cooperative team going now. We're whipping Lucia into shape on regional transportation. We're working hard with Public Works to get them to help us with some of the unpaid-for benefits that we give them. We got a lot of things that we're collaboratively working on, and we really appreciate that. And we have a real good rapport with staff. And we thank you, the board, for being a part of that, I think, really good, proud feeling we have for open space in Carson City. Lots of things going on, and it's exciting. We do have 2 or 3 lingering land acquisition projects that are in your report that are still ongoing. They're sort of gently nudging ahead. We're trying to find grants to help in some of those. We're very conscious of our current budget situation as well as the bigger picture, but we are continuing to fill in a couple of voids, if you will, on open space where we have some willing sellers or willing partners in a conservation easement. We have lots of things that are happening. The trail system is really exciting. And we're really beginning to make some progress. And Muscle Powered's been a partner. There's been a number of partners and an awful lot of support. We always have the struggle of recognizing the resource as a part of our open space. And, there have been concerns expressed, particularly with our off-highway vehicle area at Prison Hill. We're working hard to stabilize some of those impacted areas, to do signage, to do changes in trails and create a more sustainable, but still an area that's available. And we're proud to have our motorized off-road vehicle folks have a place in Carson City. We're just trying to figure out how we could keep from loving it to death. It's just really been popular. So I'm happy to answer questions, but mostly I wanted to say thank you. I would add in closing one thing. We're very pleased with Lindsay and her work. She's stepped in and done a great job. And so we're very happy to be here. We're a little late in our report to you for a number of reasons, the COVID-19 being a part of it, but I'm happy to answer any questions or take any direction that the board might have.
Questions of either Lindsay or Bruce? Anybody? Go, shoot.
More just for the record, because I certainly live right next door to this area, and so my cell phone goes off every single day about what's going on there. So can you just give us a little bit about the Carson River Trail, what's going on right now, when you anticipate it will get done, what its objective is? I think it'd be a great public interest for that entire area of our community.
Sure, good question. So the Carson River Trails Project is a SNPLMA-funded program. The trail will connect from Prison Hill, Fifth Street, where we just completed those improvements, and it'll go along the foothill or the base of Prison Hill, and it'll connect into Silver Saddle Ranch, and then there will be a segment that connects from the east side of Buzzy's Ranch into Riverview Park. So it's going to add quite a bit of trail connectivity for the community, which I think is the most exciting aspect. We just broke ground on that project within the last few weeks or so, and so like you mentioned, there's lots of activity going along, a lot of dirt work happening right now. We're right in the middle of, clearing and grubbing and doing all that, so it may look a little alarming for people who are driving by. There's a lot of activity. Like any project in Carson City, we're hoping to wrap that up by Nevada Day. So hopefully we can have some kind of COVID-friendly, bike event or a short hike or something, ribbon cutting, to really celebrate that trail, because we are very excited for the connectivity that it's going to provide.
I have to tell you all, I watched the dirt work getting done, and I wish I'd have had a camera, because I thought the whole thing was going to come down with the guy in his big dozer, moving the dirt, and I don't know how he saved himself and righted the vehicle, but it was like, oh, because it's a lot of dirt work that is getting done there. So I think when it's all done, it's just going to be phenomenal. And I'm super excited, and I can tell you that every time I text someone that it's a great project and you're going to be able to walk all the way. It's not for motorized, right? I mean, I think you should put it out there again on the record what the trail is so that the public is aware. It's not for you to put your motorcycle on it.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's non-motorized, but it is being built to be a wider trail with a compacted DG surface. So it'll be really great for biking, strollers. Parts of it will even be pretty accessible to most folks. But yeah, no motorized. So.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Anything else? Anybody on this topic, open space? Mr. Welch, you want to say something? Or are you the potted plant? You set the old guy up here. Now,
More eye candy.
more eye candy. You want to say anything, Alan?
No, just
Come on up here and put it in the microphone so we've got you on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your comments.
I would just add, along with Bruce, that we really appreciate the support that the board and the mayor has given us over the years. And I think particularly now, we all feel that the open space is really providing a lot for our citizens who really need to be able to get out and recreate.
Good. Thank you, Alan. All right, anything further? All right, then we'll close off discussion on this one. There's all discussion anyway, so we'll move on to item number 24. Thanks. Bruce and Alan, make sure you tell your board back there, thanks for everything they do. Put a lot of time in. Thanks. All right. What are we doing here? What are we doing?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Board of Supervisors. So this item is bringing back the capital that was delayed in hopes of releasing it and allowing us to continue with the work. I want to first compliment the board. This was an amazing, great decision. We're in unprecedented times. We did this in April when we were doing our budget, and I made some great reductions, but nobody knew if those were enough. And it was very scary, very stressful. However, I think we're through the worst of it. We're not out of the woods yet, but we are back in operations. Most businesses are operating at some level, and C-taxes are coming in much better than I had originally projected. So at this point, I do not believe we're going to have to use this money in the 210 fund to aid the general fund. So I don't want to mess with 21 budget yet because obviously that's still unforeseen. But fiscal 20, I really think this 210 funding that we held just in case at this point can be released. We actually got some great news on the COVID, which we'll report to you a little later. But we have a kind of a budget set out, and we got some great news about public safety, and some of the money can be used for public safety, even though they're budgeted. So I think we're going to have additional savings in the general fund above and beyond what I initially expected.
Supervisor Bonkowski.
Thank you for your presentation, Sherry. I agree with your comments that this money, which is FY20 money, I think that we're safe to go ahead and release it. I'm still very concerned about the 21 budget. Number one, because we're seeing all over the country now, including in California and some parts of Nevada, that the restrictions are being ramped up again because of increased cases and hospitalizations for COVID. And secondly, because the economic data is getting clearer and clearer that we're getting very close to going into a recession. And my personal belief looking at the data is that we'll be in a fairly severe recession in sometime in the next 6 to 9 months, no later than 12 months. Just based on the news that you're seeing about the retail industry and office. And so I think we still need to be cautious looking forward, and that things could get worse before they get better. But again, I think that I agree with you that we're pretty safe in releasing this money and getting these projects completed.
Further questions of Ms. Russell? Anybody? Go.
So I guess for me is, I still don't have 2 months of data, which, based on the last 2 months, would lead me to believe we're going to be okay for the FY20 money. More my comfort zone is you're comfortable taking this 900,000 out of the opportunity to save 2021. That's really the sole issue of discussion, right?
I am. If you remember, we did put like about $3 million of contingency in '21. We also backed off the CTAX numbers back to pre-19, so they were close to 18 numbers. So I do feel pretty confident in my numbers that these dollars can be released, especially with all the CARES money we're getting. I think we're going to have savings on top of what I expected. So the ending fund balance in the general fund, I'm expecting to be not so bad.
Well, and then just to follow up, when I look at what we're releasing here, is to talk about, am I getting an efficiency or a gain that's worth the risk, right? And that's, so.
Well, one of the biggest projects.
If we can talk a little bit about what the public's going to get with these projects, so the waste transfer pad.
Yeah, so that's at the landfill, and Darren could talk much more efficiently on this, but this is part of a larger project that they're trying to get done at the landfill, and as you know, the landfill has been busy this year. Obviously, people are at home, so they have more time to clean and do their spring cleaning. So we want to keep the landfill running as efficiently as possible because that's bringing in quite a bit of revenue. So that's that. And then the Lone Mountain irrigation system is another big one. And that one we already did the design on. So we're just waiting to do the construction. And it has to be done during the summer because while the ground is not frozen. So I don't want to lose all that design money. We might as well do the project that we decided was necessary back when we did the fiscal year 20 budget.
So I think on the transfer pad, if I recall something that I received from Darren, this was going to put another set of scales there, which was going to actually should help us in the overall management of the landfill. So I think it's important that we stress the necessity of these projects. So while we delayed them just because we didn't know if we'd actually have any cash to pay the vendors for them, that it's important that we stress what we're getting for our money here. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that,
Yeah.
my computer at home,
Yes.
so I can't
So
read it, but,
the-
right?
Yeah, the scales are past their useful life and they're failing. They're being held together with Band-Aids. And this will add a second inbound scale and it's a more automated process that will result in, more efficient running of the landfill, getting in and out.
That, I really wanted that on the record to understand my vote. It's because I think the projects are also necessary, and having failure out at the landfill is not something we can afford to do. So it's a penny now, a pound later or something, so.
Yeah, and a lot of them are safety issues. There are cameras at the jail and, yeah.
Other questions of Sherry? Motion's in order. Somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I can do it. Sure. I move to reinstate those delayed capital projects from the 2020 Capital Improvement Plan as discussed at our meeting today.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion? Discussion's in order. Supervisor
Yeah, I
Barrett.
just appreciate Mayor-elect's comment about a penny now and a pound later. Part of the problem that I face with this vote, and I'm going to go along with what I perceive to be the potential majority here, is that we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. But in the final analysis, since we have the room, we need to get some things done and get them done now. I agree with Supervisor Bonkowski's assessment that if we're not already in a recession, we're going into one. But my biggest fear, and fortunately I won't have to be here to face that, is that 3 years from now, we're going to be in a escalating environment if this thing is solved, and then we're going to face inflation. So if something needs to be done now and we can't afford to do it, it's the time to do it. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? I don't see any on the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Russell,
Thank you very much.
let me tell you, thanks for keeping a good, sharp eye out there. And I know that you watch every night about what's coming in, and I want you to get some sleep too, all right?
You know, since those April numbers came in, I have been sleeping better.
I bet. Keep an eye on Nissan, I think. Is Nissan doing all right out there? Okay, that's all right, I'll let it go. Okay, all right. Anything further on this issue? We don't see any. Okay, let's take up the last item that we have here. This is Board of Supervisors non-action items. Anybody got anything on this one? Brad, go.
Yeah, just a comment. Carson City removed the old gas lights that were downtown, and they were taken to an auction company in Story County. They were sold at auction as a batch. I'm not sure many people in Carson City knew that that happened. I think there was some interest in getting some of those. I was able to reach out to the gentleman that purchased them as a batch, and I bought 4 of them, and they're now in my yard, although I've converted them to electricity. And then same story with the fencing, the old iron fencing from downtown. That's been sitting in the corporate yard. It was auctioned off a couple of weeks ago by the same auction company up in Story County. Not sure how many people in Carson City were aware of that auction. I know there was a lot of interest in Carson City citizens that wanted some of that fencing. I just wanted to report back that that fencing, about 1,000 lineal feet of it, sold for $12,600. I was the next to last bidder. I didn't win the bid. I was trying to buy it and was hoping that I could maybe donate some of it to the Boys and Girls Club or other people that could then auction off sections. But at some point, I had to bail on that because I didn't need that much fencing. But I think that there's an inherent flaw with the way that we're handling these items. I think that they should be kept in Carson City and made available to Carson City residents and not given to an auction company out of the area in a remote location, and then, people don't even know that these items are being auctioned. So I just wanted to put that on your radar, Nancy and Stephanie, that I think that that's something that we need to look at. This also will apply to something that Dan and I have had conversations about, which is other surplus city property from other departments that comes up from time to time. So I just think that there's got to be a better way for us to dispose of surplus property and include the public.
I just want to say, I think on the fencing, there were a number of people that expressed interest in that, and we took their names, the Public Works took their names down and contacted them prior to the auction, so the people that we knew about were contacted.
So you're the reason I had to bid it up, so.
We wanted everyone in Carson to have a chance.
Anything else from the board members? John?
We had a online airport authority meeting last night and went well. We've got the grants that we've talked about earlier, about 1.3 million. Airport's in good shape. I also wanted to comment on the earlier sub-conservancy report from Ed, which was excellent, and say something that I probably wouldn't say if I were running for re-election. But he pointed out that there is an eventual benefit to the idea of higher rates. When I ran for this office, I said, water rates are going up. That's just the way it is, and it's going to be that way almost everywhere. They have gone up, but that has made people think more about how they use their water, which is a good thing, and Ed's report today showed that. It's not good to have to spend more money. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the natural results that flow from market forces in such a situation then help us conserve water, and we need to do that, even though we're in good shape. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, anything further under this item? Any board members? Nancy, you got anything that you want to say under this one?
No.
No? All right. We're ready to adjourn until we take up the health department, health board? Why don't we, it's noon right now, why don't we postpone or just delay the start of the health board until, say, 1:15 to give us a little bit more time, have somebody around here to tell people, that we'll be here so that we don't have to run out and grab and then get sick, try to get it real fast. So we'll be, if it's okay with the rest of the board, we'll be in recess until 1:15 when the Board of Health will take up its mission.